Good afternoon, colleagues and citizens, and welcome to the November 9, 2017 board meeting of the Prince George's County Board of Education. As always, I'd like to remind you to please turn off your wireless communication devices or put them on vibrate so that they do not interfere with the taping of the meeting. And I would ask Mr. Valentine to please lead the board prayer and pledge of allegiance. Please rise.
Guide and steer us to action with love, wisdom, and understanding. Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Mr. Valentine. Mrs. Parker, would you please call the roll?
Thank you. Ms. Ahmed?
Here.
Ms. Boston? Present. Mr. Burrows?
Present.
Ms. Eubanks?
Here.
Ms. Hernandez? Mr. Murray? Ms. Page?
Here.
Ms. Grady?
Present.
Ms. Roche? Mr. Valentine? Mr. Wallace?
Present.
Ms. Williams? Dr. Wiseman? Dr. Eubanks?
Present.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Parker. Colleagues, prior to the adoption of the agenda, please note the following. Emergency discussion item 4.1, independent performance audit of graduation rates, and new business first reader item 9.2 have recently been added to the agenda. May I have a motion to adopt the November 9, 2017 board meeting agenda as amended? It's been moved and seconded to adopt the agenda. All those in favor, please say aye.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Burrows.
Colleagues, for item 4.1, I would like the body to consider moving that to a time specific, 7 p.m. tonight, so that members of the public who are at work can attend. I know Ms. Ahmed sent an email to board leadership requesting that we discuss the independent performance audit graduation at 7 p.m. so that members of the public would be able to attend. I know that I sent an email to the board requesting that we have an emergency meeting on yesterday night so that members of the public can attend. I just think an issue of this significance, the first time that we discuss it should absolutely be in a venue at a time that members of the public can listen.
So you have a second on your motion?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Seeing no further discussion. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, say no.
No.
That
Can we call
motion
the
does
roll?
not pass. Excuse me?
I'd like to call the roll.
Roll call, please.
On the motion to move item 4.1 to 7 p.m., Ms. Ahmed?
Aye.
Ms. Boston? No. Mr. Burrows?
Aye.
Ms. Eubanks?
No.
Ms. Ms. Page?
Yeah, aye.
Ms. Grady?
No, I have to be somewhere else. I just know, I'm not prepared to stay in, no.
Mr. Valentine? Mr. Wallace?
Same as my colleague. I got 3 other meetings tonight. No.
Ms. Williams?
No, I also have a previous engagement.
Dr. Wiseman? Dr. Eubanks?
No.
8 nays, 3 ayes.
Thank you. That motion fails. Seeing no other discussion, I will put the vote before you to adopt the agenda as amended. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed? Thank you. That motion carries. Let's see. I want to move to 2.5 and adopt board meeting minutes for October 24, 2017. May I have a motion? It has been moved and seconded to approve the October 24, 2017 board meeting minutes. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed? Thank you, that motion carries. Colleagues, we now have a news break entitled "The Fairmont Heights High School Dedication."
Its first day of school happened weeks ago, but on October 13th, Fairmont Heights officially dedicated its new high school with a mix of reverence, exuberance, and high style.
For the nurturing of our children, we dedicate this building. For the future leaders of our nation, we dedicate this building.
Befitting a school that traces its roots to 1951, many of its alumni, having bolstered each other through the era of school segregation and remained close ever since, were there for the opening of their new hive of learning. As their jackets said, "Old hornets never die, they just buzz away."
The school itself was somewhat unique. Its very beginning was unique because it was the first black high school built with county funds. And it went to the 12th grade, which the other black high schools in the county did not. So we've been unique from birth.
They come a long way together. And I was so proud to fight for our school because I was alumni of the school. And the whole Senate and the legislature knew that I graduated from Fairmont Heights. And from the governor on down, they tried to help us save it. And this is where we are today.
One alumna, Anna Crutchfield, the former school secretary, too overwhelmed to speak, let others sing her praises.
She set the tone for the school building. She was in the front office and she set the tone. And she worked so wonderfully well with Mr. Golson and the people in the community to build this wonderful school.
And while there was much anticipation among the alums at seeing all the new school's marvelous amenities,
they're back today and they're all excited. And I talked to someone before they actually saw the school. I said, you're going to be blown away with this school that you're going to see in your old neighborhood, in your old community. And they're happy. You can see everybody wants to take pictures. This is like, first day of school for everybody all over again.
it was mostly a day of nostalgia. Nostalgia for a 67-year-old school that has touched the hearts of those long since graduated, as well as at least one high school senior on his first day in the new school.
I'm kind of missing the old school because, for me, I grew up in old school. I learned a lot about myself, and it was more so self-discovery. But this school is really good for the next classes because it's state of the art. It's new. It's not as run down. The ceilings were falling out of the old school. I'm happy that I can walk down the hallway and it's new. But I do love it, and I love the school and the atmosphere.
But your heart is still over there on Nye Street.
Yeah, the old Fairmont.
Congratulations to Fairmont Heights High School, now ready to write the next chapter in its proud history. This is Dave Zierman.
All right, thank you for that wonderful dedication of Fairmont Heights, and hopefully you noted and appreciated not only the great work we've done to build this state-of-the-art building, but the respect and commitment we have to the great and diverse history of this county. And so thank you so much for that. Let's give them another round of applause for Fairmont Heights High School. All right, I will now do the chair's report and begin my remarks today, as I often do, by honoring the memory of lives well lived and well loved, and remembering those who we have lost. And as I always note, I'm sure there may be others who we love and care about, but I want to honor four of our friends and family members. Montserrat Oliveris, a student at Woodbridge Elementary School. Mr. Marcus Moore, building service worker at Eleanor Roosevelt High School. Ms. Virginia Jenny McLaughlin, teacher at Port Towns Elementary School. Mr. Wendell Moore, teacher at Charles Carroll Middle School. Before I ask us to join in a moment of silence for these phenomenal lives, I want to yield the floor to Ms. Ahmed, who wants to say a few words of honor for one of our lost friends.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to pay condolences to the Port Towns community, the Northview community of District 5, and the friends and family members of Ms. McLaughlin on her recent passing. Ms. McLaughlin was an educator, an active PGCEA activist, and a fighter for accountability. She really cared about kids, and she was a personal friend. And she'll sorely be missed. So at this point, I'll yield back to you, the chair, to lead in that moment of silence for Jenny and for all the loved ones that we've lost in the past few weeks.
Thank you, Ms. Ahmed, for those powerful words. Friends, please join me in a moment of silence. Thank you very much. Friends, in honor of Veterans Day, which is tomorrow, I'd like to take this opportunity to express on behalf of our board and entire family in Prince George's County Public Schools our deepest appreciation for the countless women and men who have served this great country. Your sacrifice is immeasurable, and we cannot thank you enough for protecting and preserving the freedoms we hold so dearly. I want to particularly thank and acknowledge staff who have served and continue to serve in various roles in our military, and we try everything that we can to make sure that we honor their service. So happy Veterans Day. I'd also now like to acknowledge one of our board colleagues, Mr. Curtis Valentine, who will be honored at the upcoming Community Youth Advance 2017 Annual Gala on Friday, November 10, 2017. Mr. Valentine, along with several other distinguished professionals, will be awarded a Men and Women Who Make a Difference Award for showing selfless dedication to build a better community. Since being on the board, Mr. Valentine has been a continuous champion for recruitment, retention, and professional growth of male educators in the school system and for parental engagement, specifically for the role, the crucial role that fathers play in schools and families. Mr. Valentine, you're very deserving of this award, and congratulations. Give me a round of applause. Also, while one day late, I'd like to offer my personal happy birthday to Prince George's County CEO Kevin Maxwell. Happy birthday, Dr. Maxwell. Each year, often we should do it, but I hope that you reflect this year on the tremendous impact you've made on educators and students throughout your distinguished career and life, on your commitment to service, and that you reflect and appreciate those who love and respect you so dearly, and hopefully you had a great day, Dr. Maxwell. Parents and guardians, the charter school lottery is now open and applications are being accepted through January 26, 2018. You may apply online at lottery.pgcps.org. Please make sure to spread the word. We want any and every family member and student who's interested in the charter school lottery to participate actively. If you have any questions concerning the application process, please contact the Office of Pupil Accounting and School Boundaries at 301-952-6300. A couple of upcoming announcements. November 21st, 2017 at 6 p.m., the Academic Achievement Committee meeting. November 29th, 2017 at 2:30, the Parent, Family, and Community Committee meeting. December 7th at 2017 at 5 p.m. is the Capital Improvement Program meeting. and January 4, 2018 at 5 p.m. is the next board work session. Meetings of the board will be held here at the Sasser Building in the boardroom. Persons interested in speaking at meetings of the board must register with the Office of the Board of Education 2.5 hours prior to the meeting by calling 301-952-6115. As this is the last board meeting for the month of November, I want to wish everyone a safe and happy Thanksgiving break. And that concludes my chair's remarks. And I'll yield the floor to Dr. Maxwell for the Chief Executive Officer's report.
Thank you, Dr. Eubanks. Good afternoon, everyone. And I want to join Dr. Eubanks in our recognition of Veterans Day coming up at the end of the week. And I want to thank our staff and our many community members and the folks stationed in Prince George's County who have served or are serving in the military. With so many stories of violence and oppression in our world, we are truly blessed for the service you provide to keep our country safe. I also want to extend a thank you to our business partners in the community who came out in more force this past Monday to sign up to support our school system. More than 100 business partners came together to take part in our first Business Partners Breakfast, and we look forward to continuing our work with you. I also want to acknowledge the Washington Redskins and the Washington Redskins Foundation for their continued long-standing partnership with our schools and for their work this week as well. Long snapper Nick Sundberg and his wife appeared at Magnolia Elementary School to kick off the Loads of Love program launch. The new program provides washers and dryers to local schools and communities who are most in need and help children get their uniforms washed and take care of things and reduce the expenses on our families who are, again, most in need. And I also want to extend a personal thanks to Dr. Monica Golson, who helped get that program going and did a lot of work with the foundation. She was very pivotal in making sure that happened. I also would like to provide a couple of reminders for folks. We have some important events next week. On Monday night, we'll host a budget forum at 6 p.m. to get input as we build our budget. The CEO budget forum is something we've done each year just to have an opportunity for anybody to come in and speak about those things that they'd like to see us consider for our budget. Principal for a Day is on Tuesday, November 14th throughout the school system. And also on Saturday, the 18th, the second annual Family Institute Conference will be held on that Saturday at Northwestern High School. Mr. Chair, this concludes my remarks.
Thank you, Dr. Maxwell. I now at this time want to yield the floor to Mr. K. Alexander Wallace, the Chair of the Parent, Family, and Community Engagement Committee, for his committee report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good afternoon, everyone. The Family and Community Engagement Committee has met, we've met twice. We intended to have met on October 30th, but that meeting had to be canceled due to some logistical issues with the vast majority of the committee. And that committee meeting has been rescheduled for, as you said, Mr. Chair, November 29th. And it'll be from 2:30 to 5 p.m. And that will be our meeting to not only recap what we should have talked about on October 30th, but also full discussion, debate, and hopefully passage of a policy surrounding community schools, which the committee member and board colleague, Mary Kingston Roach, has been a vital leader on. The remaining meetings are listed in the document that's posted on board docs, but I want to bring one to the attention of the public. I don't know if we've done this ever, but in a long time, the committee will be hosting a Board of Education town hall scheduled for April 30th, 2018, from 6 to 8 p.m. at Columbia Park Elementary School. Something new for this committee, this year we are hosting our meetings, many of them, in the public, not here at Sasser. One meeting was scheduled at Oxon Hill Middle School. The next one will be January 29th, tentatively at Duval High School, and the final one, as I said, will be at Columbia Park Elementary School. Some of the initiatives for this committee this school year include the aforementioned community schools policy, external communications, marketing and branding strategies, student, alumni, and community engagement, strengthening our process around background checks and volunteerism in our schools and with our schools, increasing the engagement and partnership between the school system and the business, nonprofit, real estate, and faith-based communities, and reviewing any board policies that are related to family, community, and/or student engagement for any changes that need to be made. The achievements from last year of this committee, and as I told my colleagues on the committee, a committee of purpose was to enact a policy that helps the board and the administration engage a vital stakeholder that has not been fully tapped, and that's our alumni. We're working with the administration, or we have worked with the administration on the development of the customer service initiative. I see Dr. Newsom in the back, our ombudsman. Thank you, sir, for your leadership on that. And also partnering with the Department of Family and Community Engagement on developing course frameworks for the Family Institute, which was a FY17 budget priority of the committee. As we move into the budget process for FY19, some of the committee priorities in the budget will be the funding of a community schools framework, starting with a feeder program, a pilot program, funding to support the engagement of alumni of the school system, funding to establish a marketing and branding initiative for the school system, and funding to create a periodical magazine of some sort in both in-print and electronic that will be distributed to student households, schools, partnering businesses and organizations, and any other pertinent stakeholders, similar to that of other Maryland local education authorities. If there are any questions of my colleagues, I will gladly take them. If not, Mr. Chair, I do yield back the floor.
Thank you. Thank you for the continued work that you do on that committee and for the colleagues who serve on it. We'll now move to public comment on agenda and non-agenda items. Colleagues, we have 7 registered speakers this evening. I will remind our registered speakers that you are speaking in a public comment forum where the Board of Education will listen to your comments. The board will not address your comments. You will have 3 minutes to make your presentation. At the sound of the buzzer, please complete your final sentence only. If you do have your comments in writing, please leave them at the podium next to the podium so that we can put them in our records. Please do not refer directly to individuals, but use titles, and please do refrain from derogatory terms and those types of things. Adherence to these simple guidelines will help us move this process through smoothly. Thank you so much for that. We have 4 public comment speakers on Agenda 4.1. We begin with Ms. J. Parker.
Is it on? Okay. As a alumni of Prince George's County Public Schools and a former educator, the allegations against the grade tampering and graduation rates were shocking and disappointing. Having looked at the audit itself, to see that they only took a sample, essentially 8% of the graduation rate, and came to the findings that they came, and the way that it's being reported in the media is also disappointing. However, based on the comments of the CEO and the board chair, it was evident that there were findings in relation to it being appropriate, and there are things that they found that were correct, and that there were policies and procedures that needed to be reviewed and changed. That was heartening as a community member. Imagine my chagrin when I wake up the next day and see that there is a letter from the board chair directed to other members of the Board of Education, basically threatening them to name whistleblowers. Whatever the intention was, the general perception is that an appointed member of the board threatened elected members of the board to get information about people who came to, constituents who came to their elected members in confidence and confidentiality about issues that they saw in the public school system. That is very disappointing. I didn't even see a letter like that when there were allegations against another elected board member at the loss of a $6.3 million federally funded program. I didn't see any letter to her. So this is disappointing that this letter is out and it's in the public, and it is basically asking for the names of people who obviously didn't feel comfortable enough coming to you. They went to the people that are representing them and asked for that confidentiality. It's disappointing that now the board members that they have confidentiality with are essentially being threatened and bullied and intimidated to give up those names. Clearly the channels that you have weren't working, or they would have came to you or other administrative practices. One of the only things that heartened me about this audit is that it's very clear that the teachers that continue to work hard for Prince George's Public School System that came before you all of last year asking for you to put them on their steps, that they are not the ones responsible for this. And that is an administrative issue. I hope that you take that into account as the election season comes up, because myself and other people will definitely be encouraging your constituents to look at the choices that you've made over the last year.
Thank you, Ms. Parker. Our next speaker is Ms. Belinda Queen.
Good afternoon to the board members, to my community members. I am the Belinda Queen. It's no sad thing to say, but I am running for school board in District 6, and I'm running to put kids first for a change. In saying that, I do have a problem with our board right now, the ones that are serving us that are not representing the community. I'm not going to say names because it's not important, because in my heart, I'm going to believe that each of you ran, the ones who did ran, you ran because you had to want to put your community first. But what I'm seeing and what the community is seeing is not putting the citizens first. I have a problem with that. In 2018, I will work hard to make sure a lot of you are not reelected, and in 2018 on. For our CEO and everyone else, you were appointed to serve the community. It is not a personal thing against any of you guys, from the CEO to everyone who worked under you, but my kids come first. I just had tea with the Queen with my citizens at Jericho. My seniors have a problem. One senior says to me she has a problem with her grandkids coming out school stupid. I have a problem with that. I have a problem because these kids that we are letting out of school who's not graduating are the ones who's gonna be doctors and may miss me by an inch because they didn't know how to measure right. I have a problem when I go to McDonald's or take my kids and I don't get the right change from someone who barely made it out of high school. I have a problem. And if we cannot see that we're graduating our kids and we're setting up generations to fail, it is a problem. I'm just gonna say it right. Prince George's County may be the most affluent, affluent African-American county, but if we don't wake up and see that Master don't want our county to stay this way, Master want our kids to fail, we have a big problem. So we got to get these people out of office, including some of you. I have a problem as an elected official who was elected by the people for you wanting to know who the whistleblower are. I chair a coffee circle with police, and I'm sorry, I want people to come and tell me when something is wrong. I have a problem if my child, if a neighbor come and tell me something and you don't step up to make the change, so somebody go over your head to somebody else and then you want to know who told? No, I'm sorry, you don't need to be in office. We have to change what's going on in Prince George's County. It is going to start with the school system. I am going to win the seat. No offense to you, Ms. Boston. I'm coming here and I'm going to make that change.
I would ask once again that we refrain from using people's names. Thank you. Our next speaker is Ms. Phyllis Wright.
Good afternoon, everyone on the board. It's a pleasure to be here again. I'd like to thank you, sir, and all who came forward with the information in reference to what's going on in the county. As you know, I have 2 kids in the county as well. I want my kids to have a quality education. I don't want them to be passed over. I think it's unfair for whistleblowers to be threatened, to say that you're gonna lose your job if you don't tell me who told you what's going on. We need more people to come forward with information so our system can get better. I wish everybody on the board had our kids come first. If we had our children interests first instead of their own, it'd probably be a better system. Good luck to you all, and I hope next year be a better year for all of our children. And I appreciate you, sir, we can't call a name, appreciate all of the council members who came forward to let the public know, because what I saw on Channel 4, 7, and 9 was very disappointing and very heartening. And I'm with all the other people, how we have so many kids out there on the corner doing nothing because they're not qualified to get a job. They probably can't even spell their own name. That's all I need to say to the board. And to you all, have a blessed holiday and have a good day. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Ms. Deneen Johnson.
Good evening, board members and Dr. Maxwell. My name is Deneen Johnson. My son is a sophomore at Central High School. You may be relieved that the report showed no systematic grade changing or fixing problem. I was not relieved. I was even more horrified and disgusted, but not shocked by the actual findings in this report. Every Prince George's County public school parent should be. Strong words, but the students are number one, not you. We have a serious problem in Prince George's County. When this grade fixing issue was brought to the public's attention, the last thing I wanted to hear from administrators and teachers was, "Not me, not me." A leader would have taken the accusation seriously to let the community know that this kind of thing will not be tolerated. Instead, you all put everything and everyone before the students. Do not tell me that this happens in an environment where the administrators and teachers care about students. We are talking about policies and procedures that we are talking about policies and procedures that the administration and staff should know. This is about oversight, responsibility, and accountability. If the adults who are in charge cannot take responsibility, what do you expect from the students who are in charge, whom you are charged to educate? I was stunned that the CEO of schools held a press conference to celebrate these findings. What you were actually celebrating was the fact the findings did not place blame on you. When are you, the majority of the board and the county executive, going to realize that this is not about blame? This is about fixing a broken system, which is every adult's responsibility. As I stated in the email that I wrote to you all this summer, my son was a victim of having a long-term substitute teacher for his Spanish class as a freshman. He now spends twice as much time trying to keep up with his current Spanish class, even using the Duolingo app on a daily basis to practice Spanish at home. But I am just one parent taking responsibility for my son's learning. I do not think it is okay for our children to pay for your incompetence. No one thinks our kids are incapable of learning. What I'm being led to think is that Prince George's County is incapable of providing the education our children need in a caring environment. As parents, we should want our children's high school diploma to mean that they can compete with other high school graduates throughout the state and country. Furthermore, parents should take comfort in knowing that when their children graduate from a Prince George's County public high school, they will be successful in their endeavors beyond high school. Lastly, I want to thank the brave board members who pressed for this issue to be investigated. No matter how the CEO tries to clean this mess up, it was those few members who had nothing to gain but showing this community how much they care for the students of Prince George's County. If you want to continue as business as usual, that means our students will graduate without meeting the necessary state requirements. Please do not continue as business as usual. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, we don't tend to respond. I do have a right to correct what I believe is a factual mistakes, and despite how the letter has been misunderstood or mischaracterized, it did not ask for the names of whistleblowers. No one on this board has or ever will ask for the names of whistleblowers. We will and have always intended to protect their rights and privileges, including their right to anonymity. We'll move on to public comment on agenda item 6.15, and Mr. Jim Cullen, Local 2250.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and Madam Co-Chair and the entire board and Dr. Maxwell. As you know, I'm the administrator of ACE AFSCME Local 2250, and I wanted to speak today about fostering positive labor relations to solve problems in a constructive manner at PGCPS, particularly for the nearly 6,000 hardworking education support professional members of Local 2250, including those in security services, paraprofessionals, maintenance, health services, transportation, central garage, school clerical, food service, and central office. They work daily behind the scenes from dawn to dusk to keep our children safe, healthy, well-fed, and educated. They deserve our support, respect, and resources to do their job. Across the board, they are, quite frankly, doing more with less. In that spirit of constructiveness, however, I want to thank Dr. Maxwell and his labor relations team, led by Mr. Robinson, for reaching a fair economic agreement with Local 2250 for fiscal year 2018. It provides a step increase that our members have forgone for far too long, and for many years, and a bonus for those receiving, not receiving a monetary increase for moving up the step system. It's not perfect, and we certainly advocated for more, but this agreement is much more respectful from where we started, and our members overwhelmingly ratified the agreement on October 18th. We ask that you ratify this agreement today as well, as I know it's on your agenda, and we appreciate that. We hope to continue this progress by sitting down this year to begin full contract negotiations for our agreement that expires June 30th of 2018. We are ready, quite frankly. On October 18th, we also elected a negotiating team that represents our diverse membership. And they are here today, and I just wanted to acknowledge them and ask that team to stand up if they would. Thank you very much. Thank you. And we believe it is important to sit down now to discuss progress for the future, including the necessary resources in the budget. We are prepared and willing to partner with you to advocate for the resources necessary to fund a fair contract for education support professionals, including continued step movement and other benefits in the contract. Again, we ask that you include the necessary resources for this in the budget, and we partner together to advocate for it. Finally, I just want to also mention positive labor relation means honoring our negotiated agreements in a timely and reasonable fashion. We have several examples of proposed settlements or disputes regarding our collective bargaining agreement not being finalized in a timely and fashion, and our members, as a result, having to wait an unreasonable amount of time to be satisfied. As a result, they get frustrated and angry at us and also at school administration. One example is that the skilled tradesmen, one good example, back in May, we were headed to arbitration. Our contract clearly spells out an increase for those individuals because they have licenses and certifications, and they are not being honored. We pulled back because we were told we wanted to reach a settlement, and 6 months later, we still don't have a signed agreement. Enough is enough, and we ask that we reach a settlement so that these hardworking folks can be honored. And a lot of them, by the way, are veterans. So
Yes,
thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Cullen. Our next speaker is Donna Young.
Good afternoon, board members.
This is on a non-agenda item. I'm sorry, non-agenda item speakers. Thank you.
Good afternoon, board members, Dr. Maxwell, and parents. My name is Donna Young. I am an advocate for these students. I am a parent of twins who graduated in 2014, and I'm a whistleblower at Prince George's County Public Schools. I would like to first say the fact that this board meeting is being held at 1 p.m. when it does not allow for the constituents that you all sit there and support be held at 1 p.m. is deplorable, especially on the heels of what is a major report. It is very concerning that you would like to keep the feedback of those people who you are supposed to represent. And this brings me to my concerns. The report clearly implicates Prince George's County senior management. Why? Because grades are not given in a vacuum. They are done through a system called School Max and Oracle, including the attendance. So for the administration to imply that it does not reflect on itself is a force. You are over the entire school system. It is on your watch, and you need to accept responsibility. To have stood in the public and declared that it didn't personally implicate you was embarrassing. It says that our children don't matter. If one child graduated and was not supposed to, you set that child up for failure. So how you can believe that this does not impact you is unbelievable. What's more, our kids are suffering. If you're not doing what you're supposed to do with the exorbitant amount of overhead that we now have in SASSA since 2013, when Dr. Maxwell took over, what do they do on a regular basis? You have deputies of deputies of deputies of deputies, which make absolutely no sense. And if nobody's monitoring our children, what are you doing? It is your responsibility to ensure, as the administration and board members, that our children are being educated. My child graduated with a 3.6 GPA, sitting on distinguished row, and needed remedial classes. There's something wrong with that picture. Something is wrong. And I've asked Dr. Maxwell on several occasions if, in fact, he is tracking those students that are going into college with remedial classes, needing remedial classes, or drop out after their first year. To date, you have yet to begin to track that information. If you are being held accountable for what you put out there, then maybe you will look at what is being done on the inside. And I would ask that this board does consider the request to put the report on at a later time so that everyone in this community can understand what you believe. Thank you.
Thank you. Our final speaker on non-agenda items is Ms. Teresa Dudley, President of PGCEA.
First, I want to say thank you for acknowledging Virginia McLaughlin. She was my friend and a colleague, and the encouragement behind Wonder Woman, and that's me. I come here today with sort of mixed feelings about everything, with what's going on in the media, with the grading issues. But I gotta stay focused on our kids, because I can't let all of this distract me right now, and PGCEA, because we have really big problems that we've got to work together on. We've got to look, right now the Kerwin Commission has decided not to fund the funding formulas that they have been working on for several years right now, which means millions and millions of dollars that we are behind in funding Prince George's County Public Schools. The Kerwin Commission has put it off for another year for political reasons, and I'm not even exactly sure why, but we haven't even funded all of what was supposed to have been funded for Thornton. And I understand that this grading thing is important, but the reality of the situation is, as our babies, they can't take this. They can't take us sitting back and not saying anything about the Kerwin Commission and how the funding mechanism needs to be put in place. I'm also here because I'm very concerned about how we look forward in the future. I know you're having your budget hearing tomorrow night. I won't be able to attend. But the community schools policy that Mr. Alexander and my brain is shut off because I'm thinking about Jenny. But the community schools piece is really important. Our board of directors last night voted to support the 6 pillars, and that includes some of the pieces that we've already put in place in some of our T&I schools with the community services. We've also started with the pilot program for restorative practices. Every school should have the opportunity to be trained in that. We need site coordinators so that incidents like crisis incidents in schools where there are specific needs of a specific school can be addressed by a site coordinator, bringing those resources in. those are really important to us, along with the special education issues where there are just not enough special educators and our special education students are not receiving the services that they should receive. Having said all that, I want to thank Shauna, I want to thank Lou, and I want to thank the members of the negotiations team that helped us reach our tentative agreement that's going to be talked about. And however, I just want to say we haven't forgotten about the steps. Our members are steps and steps behind, and it's affecting their long-term pension outlays. And it's also defeating morale in the buildings when you have people who are being hired on a higher step when those people who have been here for a long time are behind on step. I want to thank you for your time, and thank you for honoring my friend Virginia McLaughlin.
Thank you, Teresa. And again, thank you for the friendship and faith that you have. We will move on to our agenda, and I'm going to yield the floor to Dr. Maxwell for an introduction of our emergency discussion item when the administration will, I believe, have a brief presentation for us, and then we will open the floor to questions.
Thank you, Dr. Eubanks, members of the Board of Education, for the opportunity to discuss the graduation rate audit conducted by Alvarez and Marshall at the direction of MSDE. This audit was comprehensive and identified several key areas of improvement for our system. To my knowledge, this audit was the most comprehensive review of a district's graduation policies and procedures that the state has conducted. Today's briefing is designed to provide you with the facts of the audit, its observations, our preliminary response, and what steps we plan to take. It is important to note that, as with most audits, there will likely be elements of this review we disagree with, whether on fact or in context of our work. We also discussed in this presentation some of the communication tools we have utilized to ensure our staff, parents, and community stakeholders are kept abreast of our efforts. My team and I have divided the review of the audit and will meet regularly to discuss our response to the audit and prepare a plan for MSDE within the 60 days we were given to respond. We commit to providing regular updates on our progress and another briefing of our plan that we submit to MSDE. With that, I'll turn it over to Dr. Davis.
Thank you, Dr. Maxwell. Dr. Maxwell and members of his team received a preliminary findings briefing last Monday from Alvarez and Marshall. The firm spent about 2 hours reviewing elements of their findings and relayed changes would be likely once their final draft was complete. The auditors were here for about 7 weeks and met with several members of Dr. Maxwell's executive team and other central office personnel, collected data from our IT department, completed on-site investigations at every high school, and interviewed and met with all members of the Board of Education and several members, including one state senator and one county council member. It is our understanding that the auditors received 222 complaints from 107 individuals. Some individuals had multiple complaints. However, 107 complaints were deemed related to this audit. Of the 107, the firm was able to interview 84 people during their on-site investigations. 34 of the contacts were received, came from the Board of Education, and 60 complaints came directly to them through the audit hotline. Dr. Watts?
The auditors took a sample of 1,212 students who received grade changes after our internal cutoff date and reviewed their records. It is important to note that we had 15,215 students combined in the 2016-2017 graduating classes. Here's what they found. 4.9% of the transcripts identified students that were ineligible to graduate. This was about 59 instances of the 1,212 records. In 2017, of the 630 records audited, the auditors were unable to determine graduation eligibility of 141 students due to insufficient documentation. This does not mean students shouldn't have graduated necessarily. We have requested the files from the audit team, files reviewed from the audit team to look at every single instance to see how they came up with their conclusion.
Here are some of the audit key observations. The auditors noted that our school system continues to struggle with adherence to policy and procedures. An example of that was given that there's incongruence between policies. For example, between our grading policy and attendance policy. The next one. The second key observation was that of poor record keeping at the school level. And our auditors noted that SchoolMax has the capability to automate some of our actions, and so therefore we're looking at following the recommendations to ensure that the grade change process and the graduation certification of tallying of credits is done electronically. And then the third finding is that during the data collection process, they noted irregularities. And this is the area where we'll spend our most time analyzing to better understand how they arrived at their conclusions and to assist us in making sure that we provide support to the students most needed. We have requested, as Dr. Watts stated, to get the data and the file for those that were audited in this process, so we can make sure we follow up on next steps and to ensure that the information provided is accurate. This slide here provides a summary of those three that I shared before, in addition to the governance structure, where we need to have continued communication between the Board of Education and administration.
The audit makes some important recommendations for our collective understanding. Clarify policies and procedures and train staff on awareness and understanding of policies and procedures. Minimize the potential risk management and discourage opportunities for fraud through automation of record keeping and increased controls and increased monitoring and accountability.
So at this time, we're going to be reviewing the audit, and my team and I have broken up the audit to identify and understand the audit findings. We have asked for additional information and has been noted from the auditors for clarity. We'll work with an external third party to review and implement the recommendations, and we will request a second independent review next year to ensure that we have made the progress necessary. And lastly, we will hold our students harmless for any errors that were made.
So as you can see, we wanted to put up a slide around stakeholder communication. Oftentimes when situations happen, there's a question about how are we communicating to the public, how are we communicating to schools, parents, and our broader community. So there's a list of just really rote actions we've done in the immediate aftermath. Most were last week. I do want to draw your attention to the third from the bottom bullet, support for high school principals. We actually have broken down in the Office of Communications every single high school identified in the report. Members of the team have made direct contact or with either the principal or their staff and set up one-on-one consultations to go through their individual on-site investigation findings, to provide support, template letters for their community, and to help them as much as we can, help communicate what the report says. As you know, the report is over 215 pages. It's a lot of information, and our goal in the Office of Communications is to try to help principals as much as we can, because we recognize that the majority of the questions are going to come from parents at the individual school level. In addition, we have done a number of things that the audit has already recommended. The audit, the internal audit hotline, compliance hotline information has already gone out to in our staff newsletter, and we'll continue to send that information out. Additionally, we've sent out in our parent newsletter information about the audit, and we've tried our hardest to include areas for people to get their resolutions addressed, whether it's the Office of the Ombudsman, whether it's the Communications Office, whether it's the CEO's office, and we will include the board in all those communications so you can let your constituents know as well. Dr. Maxwell?
Thank you. as I've said before, we take these audit findings seriously, and we understand the reality is that we have areas in which we need to improve. I also want to reemphasize something I said last week as well, and that I fundamentally believe. This is the right work. Graduating more students is absolutely the right goal for our school district. Much of what we have tried to implement was borrowed or influenced heavily by what our peers in neighboring jurisdictions have been doing for years, and our students have been denied those opportunities. We will continue to provide additional opportunities for students who need it and interventions for students who need additional support. This audit will require us to set a higher bar for graduation, which is appropriate and certainly needed, as we see in the audit. I'm confident of our students and our teachers and our other employees, administrators, and others that we will meet those expectations, because our students and our staff are no less smart or less capable than their peers in Montgomery County, Harford County, the Eastern Shore, Baltimore County, or anywhere else in the state of Maryland. At this point, my team and I can take a few questions on the presentations, and we will try to answer them. Dr. Eubanks, I give it back to you.
Thank you. Colleagues, before I open the floor for questions, just context in terms of the work that we've proceeded with through board leadership. There's no doubt that each and every one of us on the board take this issue extremely seriously and intend to review this audit with a fine-tooth comb and do what it takes to improve our process. I've informed the administration that while we have 60 days, we want to move that process as rapidly as we can and continue to have the board fully engaged in that process. So I have informed board office and the administration about my intent to hold a second public meeting on this in December. We usually do not have a December meeting scheduled. We will schedule a December meeting. I've asked the leadership of the board's academic achievement committees and policy committees, Ms. Roach and Mr. Valentine and their leaders, to immediately engage with their committees to work with the administration as they're going through this process, to be fully engaged in understanding what we need to do to either to change our policies and to strengthen our policies as a board, and to engage with the administration on ensuring that our academic achievement committee is well versed in what things we're going to do to make sure that students get what they need through this process. Finally, the audit refers to some possible recommendations regarding the expanded role of the internal auditor. The internal auditor is under the auspices of the board, and I've asked our board staff leadership and internal auditors in concert with the administration to look very deeply at that issue and to bring to the board a set of recommendations about the role of the internal auditor. And I know you guys are clearly already working on that as well, but given that the internal audit is under the board, we have some personal responsibility for that. So that's the work that we're doing, and with that, I will open the floor up for questions and comments so far. I have Williams, Boston, and Valentine. I have Ahmed. I have Grady. And I have Burrows and Wallace. And I'll try to keep going. I know we have more. I won't say any more because I'm assuming I have everybody. So let's start with Williams, Boston, Valentine.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to first say I appreciate the information that was shared in this report. I think it was very enlightening. In my mind, it shows that we do have some work to do to tighten up the ship. As a mother of a 2016 graduate who is now in college, who graduated with 3 certifications in automotive, I know what we do every day in Prince George's County to serve our students. So I appreciate what we do, and I know everyone works hard every day, but we just have some work to do to make it better. If we want to reach that that goal of being great by choice. We just have to do a little bit more work. So I appreciate what this report shared with us and the direction that it's giving us. And so over the last few months, I mean, this has really been a challenge for us, knowing that we were under investigation for, things not being done properly. And what they found, it just opened my eyes to say, we're entering a new day in Prince George's County. And I'm looking forward to moving past where we are today and having the improvements put in place. And as we move forward beyond this point, if you can share today, or if you have an idea of when you will be able to share more information specifically to the board, my first concern is about the 2018 graduates. There were a number of findings in the report that talked about the documentation being there, eligibility being confirmed. And so I just have a few questions regarding, first, the class of 2018. What is your plan to ensure that the class of 2018 are ready to graduate, including the documentation in place and the requirements are met? Because they're the next ones to walk out of our doors. How will this information be communicated to the parents, students, and counselors if they need some support and help? When will this process start to ensure that the support can be provided to these students as soon as possible, the ones that need support and help?
So let me take that only because I'm already in the process of working through that. Beginning the week of November 27th through December 1st, which is the week after Thanksgiving, I'll be, our professional school counseling staff, along with the testing coordinator for the school, will be meeting that entire week to make sure that they complete the tallying of credits on the PDS card process and ensuring that every student who has their community service credits form has them. They will have a downloaded APEX report that lists those seniors that have not met the community service credit. Principals will receive that on Monday. And during that week, they will go through not only for the graduating class of 2018, but they'll do 19 and 20 as well as 21, just to ensure that the credits have been tallied on the PDS card. The timeliness of it is that it's before the conclusion of the second quarter, which allows professional school counselors to contact parents if their child needs to take a credit in night school, which is prior to our graduation process, which takes place in May.
Thank you. My other question is around, and you touched on it, the piece about communicating and graduating, communicating those graduation requirements are met. Part of the report talked about school max and how it's used. In particular, the absences, the excessive absences, not only from the school day, but from individual classes. So the question is, what is the plan to improve that system to ensure that excessive absences in individual classes and the graduation requirements are monitored and communicated? We recommend that a focus group that includes counselors, principals, teachers, parents, and others be able to review and analyze that process, because there is some disconnect between the school max and how it's used and how it's picked up and things like that. And so my question, I guess, is to IT. Is school max able to monitor and track the absences from classes? And if so, who is responsible for monitoring the activity is recorded and communicated to the parents and counselors and students multiple times throughout the year?
So to answer your question, School Max does right now, period by period, attendance in high school. Okay, so all that's tallied. We do have attendance reports available in Apex today. I think one thing that we need to do is we need to review the administrative procedure and put in clarifying language to determine what, if a child misses X number of days, how that affects their grade. One of the things the report said that was very vague. Currently, today, SchoolMax does not have an ability to automatically lower a child's grade because they had X number of absences. Okay, so we may have to use a two-prong approach. We can share a report that says this many students have this absence and provide that to the administration if that kind of a decision is made that a child misses X number of days and that may affect their child's grade. Okay, we do have those capabilities.
So I think it's important that when you're having that discussion and you're looking at the process, that we include parents in on that discussion. And I don't know if it was discussed, but I would highly recommend that, because should they exceed the number, or not even when they exceed the number, as they approach that number, it is important that parents are aware. You know, parents send their kids on the bus every day and they think they end up in class and they go to every class, but there are those classes where kids try to miss. So if there is some way to notify the parents as soon as they're approaching that, excessive absences would be very helpful. So that's just one thought that's down in the weeds, but I think that it would be important that we have a parent as a part of those discussions as we look at the process of communicating that information to the parents, because, you know, we do take some responsibility of what's in that and the absences, but parents also need to be aware so that they can do their part to ensure that their child is going to class.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you. I have Boston, Valentine, Ahmed, Grady, Burrows, Wiseman, Eubanks, Wallace.
And I think my colleague probably expressed it as well as, or the sentiment of most of the members on this board about how we feel about this report as far as how it relates to our students graduating. As a grandparent and a mother of 2 alumni and a grandparent of 3 students, 2 of them have already graduated and 1 still in our school system, getting this right is very important to me, as it is to every individual who have students in this system. So our goal as a board, as a whole board, is to make sure that whatever findings that come out of this report, that we address, and we address them immediately, and make sure that our students are never questioned again about their ability to graduate and compete in this world with all the other students from all over this world. So I do have a couple of questions that I need to ask. The first one is, what is the plan to articulate the 50% good faith grading administrative policy to provide more clarity to our staff to reduce misinterpretation of that policy? I know a few years ago, this board, under the leadership of our chair, Dr. Eubanks, really pushed that our students are able to, will be exposed to the same rigor, and not just rigor, but the same multiple pathways that other counties are providing to their students. And so those changes came about at that time. So I just want to know a little bit more clarity on how we are actually providing that kind of instruction and training to our staff and how to interpret that 50% good faith grading.
So I went back to the grading policy and also reviewed the other 3 jurisdictions that also have the good faith effort process, which was Fairfax, Anne Arundel, and Montgomery County. And their language is just as vague as ours. But then I put on my teaching hat and decided that what I'll do is pull student sample work, which I've asked the content supervisors to do. We'll redact student names so that I can provide an avenue to practice for not only administrators but teachers to look at work to determine what's good faith and what's not. I'll create that PowerPoint and keep that information in the staff portal, which is not accessible outside of the system, so that they'll have an option to go back to those tools to help define the good faith effort piece. We, just like the other school districts, made the assumption that our educators are the leaders in the classroom, and they still are. But we'll provide an opportunity to give them some sense of direction.
Yes, I'm glad to hear that, because one of the recommendations that I would ask of the administration is to make sure that this board is given a time frame and you present the details on how you are monitoring and reviewing that particular grading procedure for us, because I do know, and as I truly support our staff, our teachers and our administrators, I know they're working very hard to making sure our kids are getting the best education that they can, and I'm pretty sure they're just as confused on our interpretation, and we want to make sure that they don't have that as an issue.
I just want to interject here just for the monitoring piece. So SchoolMax has the ability for us to go in and look for scores below 50 to 0. But before I even use that tool, I just want to feel comfortable in knowing that we've provided enough professional development from our administrators down to our teachers before I begin to use that the capability of that tool and show folks how to use it to monitor that piece.
Right, we're just asking, at least I'm asking, that you present to this board either in December or whenever we meet again to discuss that, a time frame by which you can let us know what you're doing to monitor that and review it.
Definitely.
My second question is, perhaps this information for internal, maybe it's more for internal audit. I know Ms. Winston is in the house. But I would like to know, what is the frequency of which hotline information is shared with this board and the executive administration on issues? I know mostly you've done is financial, but I know you've done some educational ones as well.
Make sure it's on.
Good afternoon. So our hotline database is actually manned by an external organization, company, and we get that feedback from them in the way of, we usually will get an email. I'll get an email directly. And so I summarize that information usually to the board during 2 times. First, during the quarterly reports that I do to the board, and then again at the FAB committee.
Okay. So do you have, I know you haven't had time to really talk to administration, but we would like, when you do your next report to this board, to give us some leeway or some plan that you think, or present to us some options for making sure this process is handled a little bit more efficiently, if you possible.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Mr. Valentine.
Thank you. I reclaim my time. How about this one? Is that better? Thank you. Like many of my colleagues, this does hit close to home. Like some, I have children in the system who will eventually graduate from the system. But even more so, some of you may not know that I teach at the Prince George's Community College, and many of the graduates of this system end up in my classroom. And whether they are prepared to take the course that I teach is one that is very personal to me. It is clear from what you all have said today and what I've heard is that we as a system have lost the trust of many of you. And it's important that we get that back and we maintain that. And we have to do everything we can to ensure that you all trust that when you send your children to school every day, they will be, first of all, safe, but also educated and prepared for whatever they want to be. And so the question for me, first question to the administration is, it's clear there was a failure of some of the subjective ways in which we calculate graduation, which is, through the report mentioned, using hand signals and things like that. My question to you, Ms. Golson, as a state, what are some of the objective ways that we measure student proficiency, whether they are ready for college or career?
Yes, beyond just the coursework, our students have to pass either the high school assessment if they were in the previous graduating classes, and in this current class of 2018 on, they have to pass or sit for the PARC assessment.
So parents or members of the community who may feel that there are students who are walking around now who are so-called graduates of our system but are not prepared and should not be considered graduates, can they rest assured that those students have passed the HSA, a state requirement or an equivalent, to ensure that they are ready for the workforce?
Students have to meet the state requirement for high school assessment in order to graduate, and they have to meet the state requirement for PARC. Only reason I keep going to both is because we're phasing out HSA and phasing in PARC, and so depending on where they were in that graduation process, it changes as we're phasing out high school assessments of PARC, but yes.
Okay, thank you. There was also a point that came up that I've heard tonight and also in the past about remediation rates in college, and particularly at the Prince George's Community College, where I teach. I teach students from Prince George's County, from Washington, D.C., Montgomery County, and from other states who've matriculated here to the region. And I wanted to ask the CEO, you've talked about this in the past. Can you talk a little bit about how remediation rates at the community college have changed in the past few years of graduates from Prince George's County?
Sure, absolutely. The feedback that we have from the community colleges data, not from our data, but from the community colleges data, is that in the past 4 years, the students graduating from Prince George's County Public Schools who attend the community college, the need for remediation has declined by 20% in those 4 years. So 20% fewer of our graduates now at the community, who go to the community college, now need remediation than they did 4 years ago.
Okay, 20%. Okay, thank you very much. Lastly, I'll say I was here years ago when we had a conversation about changing the grading policy. I believe this has in part impacted this report. The grading policy, which was mentioned earlier, which is in line with the Montgomery County grading policy of a 50% minimum for students returning grades, is one that was advocated for at the time because we had students from Prince George's County who were trying to compete with graduates from Montgomery County for scholarships and for entry into particularly Maryland state schools. And many parents, teachers thought that our students were at a disadvantage because they were being graded differently. And so we wanted to level the playing field. And that was some support from people from the community and from educators. I teach, again, students from Montgomery County, and they talk about how they are surprised that there's such an uproar about something that's been going on in Montgomery County for so long. I think there has to be more of a conversation about this within the community about why we did this and why we think it's important. But again, this is just another step, as I mentioned earlier, to really regain the trust of you all. It's clear that what we're trying to do is in the best interest of students. I don't think we can deny that. But it's clear we have a communication problem, the ability to fully communicate why we're doing and what impact it may have on your children, not just in your home, but also at the college level or in their career, and as many say, maybe right on your street corner. Lastly, I'll say I think it's a measure of accountability. I think many in this audience, in this community, don't believe that we are being held accountable. And that's something that I will take personally, and I hope every member of this body will take personally, because if you don't trust me, Curtis Valentine, and you don't trust this body, then I shouldn't be here. And so I want to continue to be here, but I cannot do that without your trust. And so it's important that we as a body hold ourselves accountable individually and collectively. And I will ask the administration, how can we all hold ourselves accountable as a board, but also as an administration moving forward with regard to the grading policy, with regard to student achievement, with regard of gaining the trust of this system moving forward. The question to the administration.
Thank you for that question. And that's exactly the same questions that we are now pondering. It is very important that we too regain the trust of the public and making sure that the accountability and monitoring systems in place. And during the next 60 days, that's exactly what we are going to plan for and then be able to present to the board.
I just want to iterate that there is a sense of urgency. And so the example that I provided of the November 27th through December 1st just goes to show that I know this report just came out, but immediately I contacted our professional school counseling office and looked at the timing and wanted to make sure that at the conclusion of first quarter and before we got deep into second quarter, that we provided some supports to our professional school counseling office so that we could audit student records to ensure that we could provide that support before the conclusion of second quarter and prior to night school for second semester.
I appreciate that. I think the accountability for me rests as a board member, but also as a professor, that students who I'm teaching are ready and are capable of doing the work. I will also say that anyone in the audience who's interested in engaging in a conversation with our policy committee on this, you are invited to come out. They're public. You're invited to engage and testify in those meetings as well. Those are public, and we would definitely want your inclusion and your participation in the policy process as we continue to regain your trust. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Valentine. Ms. Ahmed.
So I've been following a lot of the news coverage of the audit report. There's a lot of it. But there's one thing that I do not think has been explicitly expressed by leadership, and that's something that I want to provide today, and that's an apology. So to the assuredly and presumably hundreds of students that were passed through to graduation, and to the parents of those students that trusted our system to properly educate and not just pass our students, and to the teachers and counselors and administration and staff that might have felt obliged to participate in this, what this report shows to me is that this system has failed you, and for that I'm sorry. I think the bottom line is this, is that as a system, we have a responsibility to educate our kids and a responsibility to address issues. What's really bothersome to me is that the rhetoric I've heard from leadership via memos and press conferences is aggravating, and that's because it speaks to what wasn't found, which was evidence of top-level orchestration, but it doesn't, I haven't heard too much in those specific forms about what was found. And what I've found in going through the report is excessive extra credit opportunities for failing seniors, unofficial credit recovery programs, multiple instances where student transcripts were updated after students had already graduated. In looking more into it, I saw that 3 high school programs, 100% of the samples of the students are questionable graduates, and 24 out of 28 of the high schools, PGCPS high schools, graduated students that should not have graduated based upon that report. And so to me, that's a system-wide issue, 24 out of 28. And so that's just really concerning to me. And another rhetoric that has been out there is the rhetoric that this is all political. And I did not sign a letter citing concerns about graduation rates to be political. I signed it because I heard things from my community, and I felt I had a responsibility to do something about it. That was my intent. And regardless of what you think, what folks think of me or Edward or David or Juwan, there were 107 teachers, students, parents that were whistleblowers that contributed to this report, and I don't think that they were political. And I don't think the data is political. The auditors couldn't have pulled info that wasn't there. And so I guess what I'm really trying to say is that we're all really stressed and scared by this entire situation. I know I am. I'm shaken just saying this. But we cannot deny or minimize the issues that we have. And we have to focus on educating our students at the end of the day. And I think that's something that we all can agree on.
No. Thank you, Ms. Ahmed. Ms. Grady.
I want to thank Ms. Ahmed, for your comment, and I agree. I think that the responsibility first starts with the board as far as the oversight, and there's a lot to look at this when it comes to the findings. I think there is a lot of rhetoric out there, and I start with an apology and I agree with my colleagues about, you all not trusting us. I have 2 children in the school system. One is a 10th grader and the other one is started middle school. And I sign up for this because the same things I want for my children, I want for all our children. And I'm willing to do the work. And I think, this is an awakening for a lot of us. Not in the sense of, I didn't know there wasn't work to do before. I think that this will help guide some things that need to be looked at, and we're not shying away from that. But I do want to respond to the rhetoric or to the different sides that are out there about this being a divided board. Last year when this started, when we talk about procedures, administrative procedures, or following, or governance, it starts with us. And if we can't have the conversations first here to my colleagues to feel like, okay, whatever's being said about you, I have nothing against Mr. Burrows, Ms. Ahmed, Mr. David Murray, nothing, because I also have gained understanding that when we represent different districts, or when we we are different people with different experiences, those experiences show up differently, right? But at the end, I would like to think that we all have the best interest of our children. So I ask, and I plead with this board, that we do need to be unified. And when we talk about following administrative procedures and so forth, it starts with us. We can't keep using the media first to handle our issues. That's not going to work. What are they going to do for us? If that's working, and if you all think that's working, that's fine, but it's not. I see communities really, while they're not coming up here to the front, the people that are speaking to me, they don't look good. That's not what they're discouraged by that. They're discouraged. The same thing that you all may hear in your communities, I hear it in mine. And the morale is, why do you all use the media to do A, B, and C? But maybe it goes back to the trust issue, right? But it starts also here. So when we have meetings, and we can't have a meeting because we know the media is going to know first or right away without us being able to dive into the issues, that's problematic. You read any literature about leadership and management, I assure you starts with the trust at the governance. You want to hold anybody accountable? It's all of us. And we can't sit up here and blame whoever in this. It gets me to one of my first monitoring and accountability, right? There is this part here where it talks about the AP 5113. It has the piece where it holds the teachers accountable for the attendance logs each class. It has where it has the parent accountability to notify the school when their child is absent. School personnel must contact the parent or guardian. It has the pupil personnel worker required to report each month the names of the students who have truant in previous month. Information technology department is required to create an online interactive attendance report. We have administrative procedures with layers and a lot of information there for us to follow. The question we got to look at, the conversations I want us to dive into about what is the work that needs to be done now. Everybody in here needs to roll up their sleeves, put differences aside, and if we say we're about these babies, let's do it. Let's show our communities that that's what this is about, and let's use this opportunity to pivot and to change things starting today. Let's put the differences, let's stop contacting the media, let's talk to each other. But I mentioned this AP because it has all of these things. And so to the administration, you got communicate. So when we look at administrative procedure, I think this says something about how we're communicating or not communicating, then the implementation, then who's monitoring? And so I'll yield to the floor, but I do want to come back because I want to discuss a little bit of what I will want to expect at the next meeting in December around just the conversation around this and when we're looking at APs and how we're looking to monitor the implementation of the things that we're spending a lot of time so that it can work at the schools.
Thank you, Ms. Grady. I'll put you on for round two. Mr. Burrows.
If you can put me on for round two as well. I agree there is a lack of trust, oversight, accountability, and governance, and I look forward to that changing. Dr. Maxwell, have you or any member of your cabinet been contacted by a PGCPS employee related to grade changes either last school year or the school year before?
So I think my office received a couple of emails that were forwarded for people to look at, but I don't know that they were specifically about grade changing.
And what happened with those emails? What was the follow-up?
They were sent to the people who work with the folks that had responsibility for that area to follow up.
And what was the follow-up?
I can't speak to that at this moment without the emails and who they were sent to. I don't have that with me.
Okay. Were you or anyone on your executive level or above knowledgeable that we were graduating students that did not meet the requirements for graduation?
I was not.
What about anyone at your executive level?
To my knowledge, no, but they can speak for themselves.
I was not.
I was not.
I was not.
No, sir.
I was not.
Thank you. And on page 4 IV of the report, number 4 does not meet graduation requirements. In 2016, the percentage of students that didn't meet requirements was 3.6. In 2017, that number jumped to 6%. Can you describe why?
I cannot at this time. That's why we've asked for the additional information on who those students were so that we can look at that and confirm or refute whether or not we agree with that and look for the reasons why.
On page 4, it says PGCPS management does not currently monitor or adhere to grading procedures at individual school level. Leadership generally assumes that principals and school-based staff will follow the policies and district procedures, but does not currently verify them. Does not verify that schools are following them. I have your organizational chart here. Whose responsibility is that?
I'm not sure, again, this briefing on the report and the questions you're asking are a little bit disconnected, but I would agree that our work has pretty much assumed that the principals, the counselors, the people who are collecting grades, working with students at the school level, have traditionally been the people who have been responsible. As a principal myself in 3 different schools, 2 of them high schools in 2 different districts, it was always the schools that verified as the school year was ending with seniors whether or not they had met the requirements or not, filled out the PDS cards, and certified that these students graduated.
Well, my question, you mentioned school-based employees, but on page 4 of the report, it speaks to PGCPS management does not currently monitor or adhere to grading procedures, and that the district, on the district level, does not currently verify that schools are following those rules. So I'm looking at your organizational chart. Who has the responsibility to monitor and verify that schools are following these procedures and rules?
Thank you for your question, Mr. Burrows, and I'm also on page 4 of the report. And I would like to go to the recommendation column of that because it's already noted that we don't do it, but the recommendation that they have put there is that we need to improve the school level accountability. We should develop metrics that can be generated from school max and review quarterly to monitor adherence to grading procedures. So as some of your previous colleagues have questioned regarding the school max, we do know that we do have antiquated procedures in order to be able to certify graduation So therefore, until it becomes automated, it is going to be difficult to be able to monitor.
Well, I know we don't do it currently. I guess I'm trying to figure out who's responsible for doing it.
Well, who will be responsible? Is
So
that
no,
what you're
so
asking?
no one is responsible for that currently, is that right?
Sir, I believe, once again, that you've read on page 4 that it's not being done currently.
Yes, I know it's not being done, but just because things are not being done doesn't mean that people are not responsible for doing them. So what I'm trying to figure out is who is responsible for that area?
Okay, so who's responsible
Or what
for-
department?
Yes, so who's responsible for supervising schools would come under my jurisdiction.
Okay.
But as we continue to do our plan, our 60-day plan, this piece that was noted in the audit will be addressed.
Okay, and your office will be addressing this particular part?
Not necessarily, because once again, part of it deals with IT as well. So all of the plan is probably going to be a collective effort of Dr. Golson, Dr. Watts, Dr. Maxwell, and myself.
Got it. Dr. Maxwell, you mentioned that you would, what happens to these graduates now?
So I think there's couple of different things. First, we set up a website for any of these graduates who may be in here. But again, what we've asked for is exactly who are these kids that they've identified, allow us to verify that information, and if and when we receive that information, we can reach out to those students to see if they are in any need of support.
I guess I'm asking, we identify students that don't meet the requirements. What happens to that student?
Let me answer. Like, for example, in the slide it listed there were a total of 59 students who the auditors felt were not eligible to graduate. So once we get those student names, what I'll have our curriculum and instruction team do is go through and evaluate the transcripts to see if it's a course issue first. So let me give an example. So if they say, yeah, the student didn't meet the health education requirement, what my team will do is go through the transcript and see if there's another course that we could substitute that could meet the health education requirement. For example, if the student took sports medicine as an elective, we can substitute that sports medicine for a health education elective. So that way we could actually then document and verify that that student is eligible. So it's kind of like a case by case. I would have a team go look at it, and multiple people would have to sit on that team so that we could kind of rectify and get it corrected.
And I think it's important that it's not all the academic pieces of some of these students that was noted have to do with community service learning, for example. And so again, you're asking for like a one-size-fits-all. What are we going to do? We need to figure. We've asked for that additional information, and then we'll do that research, and then we can make an educated response to that.
I guess what I'm getting at, in your opening, you said that you would hold these students harmless, but for a lot of these students, they've already been harmed. And, if you miss more than 50 days of school, and yet we graduate you, if you were supposed to take math, and yet we did not require you to do so in order to graduate, you are already harmed. And so we have a number of these students in the community college or elsewhere that have already experienced harm. And so what do you mean by hold harmless?
So when we say hold harmless, it's like we don't believe that their diplomas are going to be rejected by the state. We don't believe that they're going to be, those are the things I mean by harmless. When we talk about kids, and we have to be careful again with some of the way that we phrase questions and things. I was contacted by a parent whose child was hospitalized a number of times over the last year or two and has missed significant amount of time, has received help from our folks who work with health impaired children. So when you just throw out and say somebody who's missed 50 days and shouldn't have graduated, if they've provided the right supports and yet they've been absent, that's a different kind of question. And so I think, again, we need to look at each individual case and make sure that we understand what the circumstances were for each individual case. And as a part of the audit, as I said in the beginning, we have the opportunity to agree or disagree with parts of what they're recommending. We have 60 days to say, here's the plan, and then we have time to complete the implementation of that plan. I wouldn't expect that everything in the plan is going to be completed within the 60 days that we have to develop the plan. Our first priority needs to be to get the plan completed.
Right. I have a question for internal audit. When you conduct an audit, what is the process that you use to notify members of the board on the results of that audit?
So for all of my audits, I usually will address it to the people that have a need to know, the manager of the department, his or her supervisor. It goes to the CEO, as well as it could be members of the executive team, as well as the board chair, and also the board vice chair. Subsequently, I will do a quarterly report to the full board, all of the board members, where I will summarize all of the reports that have been issued. And I report verbally on that quarterly report at the FAB meetings.
Don't you always email the board member who represents that district the audit
Yes.
report? You do?
Yes.
So if you do an audit, you would notify the board chair, the vice chair, and the member of that district?
Yes.
Okay. When Alvarez was here, I received notice that there was an internal audit done related to grade changing, and I sent internal audit an email. I called and I asked for a copy of all the audit reports from the last year. You told me that you would respond to me by November 2nd. Is there a reason that you did not provide those audit reports to me?
I provided you the quarterly report that summarized those reports.
I didn't receive that. I also, because of time, I specified my request, and I asked for a copy of any reports that dealt with grades, grade changing, record keeping, or anything related by close of business the next day. Is there a reason that I was not provided? On page 5, it listed that internal audit had done reports based on grade changing, and I requested that. Is there a reason that I was not provided that information?
The auditors from Alvarez had requested that any information related to that report not be released. I had released those reports to Alvarez, and I was instructed that I should not release those any further.
So why didn't you just
Or requested.
I guess, so why didn't you just communicate that? Because I'm a member of the board trying to perform my governance and oversight duty, and I hear that there are internal audit reports that other people have, and I also wanted those reports to turn into Alvarez, but you did not communicate that to me. You just did not reply to my email. And so I can't do my job if there are audit reports out there related to grade changing, grade fixing, and I can't get a copy of it. And the board member for that district did not get a copy of it.
My apologies if you felt that way, but by sending you the summarization of the report in the quarterly report, I have felt that that satisfied your request.
Thank you. Ms. Golson, when Mr. Valentine was asking a question related to HSAs and standardized tests, you mentioned that students either had to pass the HSA in order to graduate. Is that right?
Correct.
And so are you aware of instances where students who graduated who did not pass the high school assessment?
No, I'm not aware of anyone who did not pass the high school assessment. So let me, I think I know where you're going. What pass means is that if you don't get the qualifying score, you do have other options authorized by Maryland State Department of Ed to meet that requirement. So in some cases, we do have students who have to complete what we call AVP projects, which are academic validation projects, which are authorized by the state. And based on your score, it determines how many of those projects that you have to complete. Also, in addition, you could not get the qualifying score on maybe a mathematics assessment, but get an even higher qualifying score in another assessment like local, state, national government, or English. And through a combined option, you could still meet the graduation requirement. So Maryland State Department of Ed kind of put in multiple pathways or ways that you could, not multiple pathways like ours, but multiple ways that you could meet the criteria. It doesn't have to be meeting that target score for the specific assessment. It could be through that score, the combination of multiple scores on multiple assessments, and through the use of academic validation projects.
Are there students in the system who did not do the AVP projects and did not pass the high school assessment that graduated to your?
So let me clarify. There may be some students who did not have to do an AVP project because they got the qualifying scores. So not everyone has to do an academic validation project.
No, I'm
Only
saying
those-
you failed the HSA
Okay,
and you did not do the AVP,
No.
and you were still issued a diploma.
that I'm not aware of.
Okay.
All right, here for round two, Mr. Burrows. Dr. Wiseman.
Okay, first, I know the next 60 days will be really busy as you all work with your policy and procedural issues and work through this, and I have every confidence that there will be some good outcomes from that. I have a question that really is maybe a more long-term question or long-term concern that's kind of embedded in the report, and it really comes off of the table number 4, which is on page 17. And right before that, it talks, and it's really focusing on the MPTS, which of course got a lot of focus because that's where so many grade changes occur. And the paragraph before that says that thousands of students participate in these programs, meaning MPTS, with the largest number, well, that's not the point. When you add up the number of students in that table, the number is 5,652 students participating in these MPTS. And there wasn't a lot of context around this, and this is really maybe a longer-term question that I would be interested in, is what is the background? Why are those students, in so many of them, participating in the MPTS? Are these ones, first of all, that are preparing for graduation? Because when you would compare the number 5,652 with our graduation numbers, which are around 7,600, that's a really large percentage. Now, am I just really getting off? I mean, is that not a good connection to make? I'm just adding up that table 4. Those are all the students that are in the MPTS. I'm wondering why they're having to do.
Could those be more? I mean, that might not be additive, right? That could be multiple students.
Right, that might not be individual students.
Okay, that's what I needed to know. That's what I was curious about. In any case, I would be interested to know really kind of the makeup of, and I think Dr. Maxwell spoke to this too, that part of your analysis will be to find out why these students are having to take, why these students, you were talking more about grade changes, but I'm even backing it up more into these credit recovery courses and wondering why we have so many students in those credit recovery courses.
Yeah, so I think, there's a couple pieces there. First of all, there's a lot more work than doing this, and I think there seems to be in the dialogue a presumption that all grade changes are bad, and that is simply not true. There are a lot of reasons. I mean, we have students, as you know, and as others know, that are in dual enrollment, and I have a meeting coming up in 2 weeks about how we can do a better job of exchanging transcript information and that kind of work with institutions of higher education that our children work with. The virtual online, the online work that the state of Maryland offers is something that is not done quite the same way than if they're in somebody's English class or math class. There are students who are on home and hospital teaching whose grades sometimes come in and the quarter, report card grades are there and we have to go in and change those. There's a couple of other situations that others can speak to better than I, but grade changes they should not be considered automatically because a grade was changed, something was wrong with it. There are certainly cases here where we question, but I think, when we came in and started doing our transition work and developing our strategic plan, we noticed, again, this is part of a broader piece, but this is a slice of looking at that work. We saw that the graduation rate was very, very similar to the 9th grade promotion rate. And so we started a lot of different work. This is a piece of that work. Some of that work was the early warning system to say these kids, based on certain metrics, early in their high school career are in danger. I mean, they're kids that we should be figuring out, you know, what kind of interventions, what kinds of things do we need, what kinds of supports do we need to provide these children, and middle school principals, you know, get information. And then what kind of plan is the school going to develop to make sure that that all of our students get what they need? This is sort of putting together and saying, here are the different kinds of, some of the different kinds of interventions that we have available for kids that they can participate in. And it would be, I think, my hope and the hope of my team over time that as we get there, as we get to the harder work of that pre-kindergarten, right? That's part of the long-term strategy too, more kids in early childhood education, moving up through middle school and into high school, that as that work improves, the need for second and third chances should diminish. But I think that, you know, what Dr. Golson said a minute ago about the state, I mean, the state itself and other jurisdictions in this state and across the country have taken steps to give kids multiple opportunities or multiple ways to meet success. And I think the example of the combination of the score, because, you know, when we use the word we failed an HSA, if we didn't meet the cut score, I can only assume that's what failed means. If they met a higher score on multiple other of the HSAs, there's a cumulative score option. And you can graduate if you didn't meet the cut score on this HA. And that's not my rule, that's the state's rule. The state has, you know, set those parameters up for children. And so we've set up some parameters for ours. We've given kids who are struggling some additional opportunities. And again, other districts do this same thing. And that's not to say it's right or wrong, it's to say those kids have advantages that our children did not have. Apex Learning, we had a student who spoke. Apex Learning is an original credit. We had a student who started with a cohort in school. Their parents came here from another country. The only way for her to be able to graduate on time with her originally intended or originally, I guess, sequenced graduation was to take an original credit course through another program. And so Apex was that child's opportunity to graduate on time. These programs, again, are opportunities for kids. It's clear from the report that there are people who went beyond the parameters, extended the parameters, were confused about the parameters, and that's the work that we need to get into.
I guess I was primarily concerned about the number. I mean, I just don't have any, you're helping me build some context for these options, but it just seems that 5,625, 52 is a lot of students, and I was just kind of curious. I know they'll come from a lot of different, there for a lot of different reasons, but part of the analysis, I hope, this is long-term after the policy and procedures are taken care of, but somewhere I think the analysis we need to look at why are students having to take this direction
We agree.
in so many cases. That's, I guess that was the basis of my question.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Dr. Wiseman. Ms. Eubanks.
Thank you. Most of my questions have been answered by now, but there are just a couple of things I just wanted to say. I am not pleased with the results like everyone else, but I'm glad that we know now exactly how to move forward. And that's what we need to do. We need to move forward and have a clear guide and a clear direction for not just our employees, but for our families as well, so they'll know. Because I hear, and I think I know exactly who Dr. Maxwell was talking about when he was talking about one of our students, but I've heard this about a couple of students, because we've had some students that have been deathly ill, and they've missed school for months. They were bright students, doing very, very well. And if we didn't have these different pathways where they could go in and make some changes, she would not be graduating next year. And she is due to graduate in 2018. So I'm glad we do have it, but we need to have it clear, because that's how I hear it too. Everybody thinks, oh, they're changing grades, so something's wrong. But why can't we change grades to make something right? for that student who needed that help. Like I said, most of my questions have been answered, but I just wanted to state that. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Eubanks. Mr. Wallace.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I approach this work, as my colleagues know, very qualitatively. I approach this particular matter both professionally and personally. As my colleague, Mr. Valentine, mentioned about students' matriculation to higher education, I did have some questions and some experiences, but first a question to the administration. If we could, I know it's been touched on in committee meetings or in the public board meetings, but could you explain the difference between meeting state high school graduation requirements and being ready for higher education?
So do you mean college and career ready versus?
Absolutely.
Okay. So Maryland State Department of Education has the College and Career Ready Act of 2013. And in that act, it states that students, in order to be college and career ready, have to be proficient in one of the assessments that I'm getting ready to say. It can be through PARC at English 11, Algebra 2. It could be through dual enrollment, as long as it's a credit-bearing course in English or algebra. It could be through international baccalaureate, passing international baccalaureate exams. It could be through getting a 3 or higher in an advanced placement exams. It could be through obtaining a technical skills assessment certification and accuplature, getting a certain score on accuplature. So you're deemed college career ready if you fall into one of those many categories.
Thank you, Dr. Golson. My next question for the administration, Mr. Rhodes or I believe Ms. Ravenhill, can we make sure that this board meeting that's being taped can be posted on all social media accounts for those in the public who cannot make it, that can watch the full recap?
I believe currently our Board of Education meetings on our YouTube channel. We can make sure that's on the front part of our website, and we'll bring attention to it.
Appreciate it. Thank you very much. I know some folks cannot make it out on a Thursday at 1 o'clock, and some folks can't make it out on a Thursday at 7 o'clock. So, I feel bad for those who have to work 12-hour shifts like a lot of my constituents. But onto a personal note, I really do approach this work. I'm not fortunate enough to have children yet, but I do have several family members that are matriculating through the school system now. I have had my brother actually graduate from the school system very recently. As a matter of fact, in one of the years that was analyzed by this report. One of the first graduation speeches that I gave was at his. And I shook every single hand of those graduates at Wise High School. But I only gave a big hug to one, and that was my brother. Because, and folks may know this, I talked about my brother all the time. I went by the fire station up the street, Station 820, earlier today to spend some time with him because he was heavy on my heart and my mind today. Because our journeys in PGCPS were completely different. I was the honor roll student, got scholarships, accepted into almost every higher education institution that I applied to. I'm still mad at College Park, Dr. Wiseman. But my brother, his journey was very difficult. His journey was very tough to graduation, but fortunately he was tougher. My brother struggled in mathematics, and if it was not for the academic supports, the very same supports that have been questioned by many and analyzed by even more, he would not have graduated on time. And my brother, I think he's 19, he's 20 now. This 20-year-old is the third in command of a fire station in Prince George's County, the bravest person I know. And he leads a platoon, however you say that word, of 50, mostly old Caucasian males from outside the county. This little black boy from Prince George's County. And he's but 3 minutes away from here, the Sasser Administration Building. And if we were to have a fire or medical emergency right now, he would be here in 3 minutes or less with his team, and he would probably save your life. he would possibly even save the lives of those who questioned his success as a high school graduate. And he'll look you in your eyes and he'll help you. He wasn't harmed. As a matter of fact, he heals. So when we think about our comments, our rhetoric, interviews, letters, think about the successes of this administration's work. My parents are indebted to the school system, not because I graduated with a good degree from undergrad and graduate institutions because of the academic journey here for me, but instead because of my little brother, who, like me, is a public servant who wakes up every day wanting to do the best he can day after day. And as a firefighter, my brother knows a little bit more about things being burnt than I do. But I can tell you right now, a burnt bridge does not lead to accountability. It leads to isolation. And you don't have to be a firefighter to know that. So Dr. Maxwell, I express this to you personally. I thank you very much. My parents, thank you very much. And I think the county, especially this Upper Marlboro area, thanks you and your administration very much for the supports that you have given my brother. I yield back, Dr. Chair.
And with 2.3 seconds left. Thank you, Mr. Wallace. Ms. Page.
All right, I would like to first say that I appreciate the audit findings because now we know what needs to be improved, and what we can now do is start brainstorming on different methods to improve. To hold ourselves accountable and to also hold local principals accountable as well. I am a student of Prince George's County Public Schools currently, meaning myself along with my constituents are directly impacted by these results. I now have to be concerned about how colleges will look at my high school diploma compared to my other peers across the state of Maryland. After speaking with my constituents, we recognize and we accept that we cannot go back in time and change what has occurred, but what we can do is stay on this report and make sure that we are improving our county in the right directions based off the audit findings. On this note, I have a couple of questions. The first being, what new accountability measures are going to be implemented for our school administrators and internal auditors moving forward?
Thank you for your question. And once again, since we have not really completed the plan, we don't have all of the details, but the accountability will actually begin on Monday. As Dr. Golston has shared, while she has begun the conversations with the professional school counselors, we happen to have had a high school meeting planned this Monday. That meeting agenda has now changed based on some of the preliminary information that we have been able to read and digest. So on Monday, the high school principals will be allowed to bring not only their professional school counselor, chairperson, but also their grade manager to the meeting. And we'll spend a half day meeting on several topics that include graduation and promotion certification, student learning, credit hours, grade appeal and grade changes, as well as separation of duties. But please understand and be patient with us that we don't have all of the details for accountability, but the communication and the understanding and the shared purpose and urgency to make sure that the graduates of 2018, which is your class, that we're gonna do the best that we can.
2019.
Oh, she's 19? Oh. Your class as well. But the class of 2018 and class of 2019 and everybody else that graduates, the information that's in this report, we do want to improve.
And if I could just add, when you talk about accountability and auditing and those things, the report does mention internal audit, but also mentions external audit as well. And we're having discussions about the external audit option as well before we make a decision and not just leaping to adding to the workload of our internal auditing staff here, but rather perhaps using a third party that will, we have a lot of different options in there. There's probably an RFP required or a contract extension of responsibilities, those kind of things. But we're discussing that part of it now, and also the pieces where it talked about using technology more robustly. We have some of these systems that we have don't talk to each other in the way that we would have liked, I think is a fair way maybe to describe it, and trying to figure out how we integrate different functions and how we add different options that maybe we're not using right now, so that that monitoring and accountability becomes easier to look at and to complete.
Okay. Dr. Davis brought up a great point about how you're meeting with professional school counselors. So my next question becomes, do you believe that the student-counselor ratio has impacted the poor record keeping that we have?
Actually, I requested that information from our professional school counseling supervisor, and the recommendation is that it be 250 students to 1 professional school counselor. And of course, no one has met that national standard requirement, because I also have a chart which shows each LEA for the entire state of Maryland, and we're consistent with the other local education agencies. I have the chart, which I can actually just send to Ms. Berry so she can share it with the entire board.
Please.
Sure.
I think that would be interesting to investigate how many counselors.
I want to say it's 300 something to 1, but I don't want to be quoted on that, even though this is taped.
My next question, I mentioned earlier how I now have to be concerned about whether or not colleges will look at my diploma with equal weight to my colleagues across the state of Maryland. And so this report and audit has been thoroughly publicized through the media. So my question now becomes, will it be communicated to college representatives for the state of Maryland, and specific to Prince George's County, what changes we have made and what changes we are going to make to ensure that our diploma has the same weight as any other Maryland State diploma?
So I'm just going to speak briefly about some of the university or higher education partners. Dr. Maxwell has requested a meeting with many of the college presidents and universities local here in Prince George's County. We have University of Maryland, Bowie State University, Prince George's County Community College, to have a conversation about what our diploma is, what it means, and ultimately engage them in the process of our plan, so that at least particularly those who we work with the closest are clear about the work that we're doing and also understand we want their engagement and partnership in this process. So that's currently being scheduled, and I know Dr. Golson can speak a little bit more about some of the other work that we're doing.
I just want to add, what's not in question is the delivery of instruction that takes place in that 90-minute time period each and every day for high school students, and obviously less minutes for middle and elementary. But that's important, because our educators go above and beyond to make sure that the prescribed curriculum is delivered. Our principals have monitoring tools to make sure that that is done, and what's here is about policy and procedures, record keeping, and irregularities.
Okay, so you said that you're going to be communicating with Bowie State University, Maryland University, and Prince George's Community College. What about students that want to go to college out of state?
Sure. So I just wanted to speak directly to those that we have the closest partnerships with. I believe that the conversation around other universities and higher ed partners can be part of our analysis as we go through the audit and pay attention to some of the recommendations and findings. I just wanted to talk a little bit about the immediate conversation with those partners that we currently have the closest relationship with.
Okay, I wanted to piggyback off of what Dr. Wiseman said in regards to how and why our students are currently failing some of their courses to not meet the graduation requirements. So once you guys do get the results of that investigation, can you please contact me as well? Thank you so much.
Thank you. I'll go as quickly as I can, and then we'll go to round 2. A couple of quick questions. One, it's essentially a follow-up to Mr. Burrows' question about accountability. I'm going to be really interested in, and I don't want folks to take this the wrong way. Every instructional director who I've ever engaged with, I've only been impressed with their professionalism, their skill, and their knowledge. But when I read that there's not accountability happening around graduation rates at the school level, the first thing is, isn't that what IDs should do? So when you do that analysis, I'd love for you to be able to think about and share with us how the role of IDs in particular can be either changed or monitored or developed in ways to make sure that in that system that we have, that there's significantly more oversight. I don't know, you don't need to speak to that right now. You could if you want about the role of IDs, but I want to put that out there. Okay. The second one is a question, and I think I've heard the answer to this before, but one of the big pieces around in the audit was the difference between the way we do our handwritten processes. And so I think I heard this, but do we know that other districts are already automated and we're not, or are we kind of on par with all the other districts? And how much money will it cost us to be automated quickly?
So my understanding is that many of the districts are automated, and what I mean by that is it tallies, it calculates the graduation requirements. Inside SchoolMax, we calculate all the credits, but we don't look at it and say, do they have a freshman English, sophomore English, junior, senior, you know, that kind of thing. So one of the things we have to do is we're in the process of working with our colleagues and academics to look at the courses and to determine those graduation requirements. So we're in the process of configuring that and testing it now.
So, and is it assumed that us moving to that level of automation is going to require an investment?
It's too early to tell right now, sir, but I think the work that we're doing, we'll be able to tell that real shortly.
All right. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. My third question / point kind of goes back to what some of my colleagues talked about earlier, and the danger that that we must avoid to go backwards. One of the things that we know, and that this has demonstrated clearly to us, is that graduating students who don't meet graduation requirements does them harm. That is absolutely undebatable, and we need to fix that. But we cannot forget that failing to graduate students does even more harm. And when we fail to graduate students, that's not the student's failure or the family's failure anymore, anything else. That's the system's failure and maybe the broader society's failure. So when I look at page 2 of the report, and I see that in 2012, we were graduating 73% of our students. And folks have heard me say this many times. We should have been investigated in 2012 for why we were only graduating 73% of our students when Montgomery County is close to 90% right next door to us. I think it's interesting that there was an article this week that Washington, D.C. just got to 75% from 50%. And I made the mistake of reading the comments on the end with folks saying they must have learned how to cheat from Prince George's County. And just this constant play that when we do better graduating poor black and brown kids, we must be cheating. And how do we fix that narrative? And how do we not get into a position where we overcorrect? If we graduate if we're at 73, we fix all these problems, and then we're at 73% in 2018, 2019, we have failed miserably. We must graduate more kids and do it right, and must make an investment to make that happen. So to me, in the short run, I really liked your answers about engaging with students early in the process, finding the students who need help and getting it to them. I hope, and I certainly would support, that if we need to make some serious short-term investments to additional tutoring, buying some packages, some online packages for support, doing some things short-term to make sure that we're at 81%, or as close as we can this year with no mistakes, then I think that should be our goal. It's a tough goal, but I really want to push that it's a big mistake if we go backwards. So, all right. We're back to round 2. I have Williams, Grady, Burroughs, Valentine, and Boston. Ms. Williams.
Thank you. I'm going to continue my thoughts about moving towards a new day in Prince George's County Public Schools, because I hate to stay on the problem. We can investigate the problem for a long time and never fix it because we're not focused on the future. So When I think about it, I think that we're moving to a better way of communicating with our stakeholders, a better understanding of the policies and implementation of the policies, and better monitoring and holding people accountable. That's what I think success looks like for us in Prince George's County. So when we look at all the topics and discussions around specific items that were around grading and graduation rates, I tend to put on my engineer's hat and see that there are a bunch of knowns and unknowns, a bunch of variables, and then I look, what is the broader picture? And a lot of the things fell around the administrative procedures. So this may or may not be a part of your January presentation to the state, but as a board member, these are the things that I'd like to become more familiar with and aware of when it comes around administrative procedures. When new procedures in particular are put forth, and when we change existing procedures, and in particular around the graduation requirements that the procedures that already exist, I would like to get a regular update, and I don't know that frequency, but in that update, I would like to see what the procedure is, how the procedure would be implemented, how the procedure would be communicated, how it would be monitored, and what positions or departments would be responsible for ensuring that the procedure is adhered to. So that we can be up to speed and up to date on the procedures that you all put out there to our staff. I think that would definitely help us to sort of be more familiar with and understand the procedures that are put out there, because we do the policies. And it took me like a year to recognize the difference between the policies and procedures, because I would use them interchangeably. But we create board policies, and then based on that, you all create administrative procedures that talks about the how-to. We talk about the big picture, what it should look like, and you all talk about the how-to. And so I think it's important that we understand that how-to when you all do it. And we can talk about in our meetings how it'll come to us in the frequency, but I think it's very important that we become more aware of that. That was a quick 3 minutes.
It always seems that way when you're the one talking. When you're the one talking, it always seems quick.
Thank you, though. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Ms. Grady.
I think I want to hone in on a specific area. I heard that Monday would sort of start with looking at this response with gathering from the principals to the counselors. I just also would want you to consider, because of the example that I used was around there is an AP, but it's sort of what's the oversight. And in this part of the administrative procedure, it talks about pupil personnel workers are required to report each month names of students who have been truant and to the previous month. Do all of our high schools have pupil personnel workers?
Yes, they do all have one assigned to them.
All of them do? Okay, that's great. I just think that it would be great to, aside from the principals and the counselors, I just think it's always good to get information from the people that are doing the day-to-day. And I know that Ms. Williams mentioned about focus groups, but I just want to reiterate, getting information from the pupil personnel workers, the communication. I guess that would be more of the principles around just the communication if a child is already absent. Because I think that a lot of these pieces need to be able to talk to each other. Something is not connecting. So I just would want to really highly recommend that in these pieces that a lot of deep dive, it's taking place into looking at what are the pieces that are not connecting. And I know that has to just be, that will unfold as those conversations happen.
Thank you. Mr. Burrows.
I didn't plan on giving any long, drawn-out speeches, and I won't. But I would say that if you want to regain the trust of the community, you have to start operating differently and very honestly. You have to be honest about the findings. I know Dr. Maxwell mentioned, and another member mentioned, a student who has been out for multiple days because they're sick. Well, that is not constituted as an unlawful absence, and that does not address what this report is talking about. In fact, the report says on page 28, in 2015, 37.6% of graduates had unlawful absences greater than 10 days. And in 2017, 43.8% of graduates had unlawful absences greater than 10 days. And in 2017, over 150 graduates had more than 50 unlawful absences. And so when you use the little examples of this one sick child, you use that to try to minimize what's in the report, and the public will always find out what's in the report. When you use lines like, this is nothing more than poor record keeping, and then the public looks at the fact that you graduated hundreds of students that didn't meet the requirements, or that teachers felt like they've been intimidated and bullied and forced to pass students along, or there's just so much in this report, or that in the middle of the investigation, we had employees trying to change things to make it look like students were eligible for graduation, although they were not, and then you minimize it all to poor record keeping, you lose the trust of the community. So I would advise the board and the administration that if you want to regain the trust, and I'm not sure that you can, frankly, you have to at least start out by being honest, because if you can't be honest about what's in the report and frank about what you're going to do accountability-wise, you will not regain the public's trust. And as a board, if we want to regain, as a unit, regain the public's trust, we have to be willing to hold the administration accountable. I mean, this is nothing to celebrate. It's nothing to look lightly about. Dr. Maxwell and his team did not provide the proper oversight and governance when it comes to the graduation rates. And we cannot be afraid to say that. I am disappointed that his compensation package is over $450,000, and this is the type of results that we are receiving as a community. And we can't be afraid to say that. I mean, I think we are operating, in this bubble, but the public is not falling for it. And if we want to regain the trust, we have to be willing to say, Dr. Maxwell, your performance is unacceptable. And you need to, I don't think that you can regain the public trust, to be honest.
Thank you. Mr. Valentine.
Thank you. Thank you. I just wanted to, as we're talking about solutions and really getting to the point where we are addressing some of the issues that were recommended in the report, the ratio of school counselors came up, and I wanted to just make a recommendation as you're doing some of the research on how to improve the ratio. There's a good example from Alberta, Canada. I was able to travel to Edmonton and to visit some of the schools there. And what they've been able to do is really empower teachers to reduce their caseload and actually allow and train them up to be part-time school counselors. So they get a cohort of students, maybe 5 from every class, and so you may have 20, and they're allowed, and they meet with these students almost on a weekly basis because it's divided across 30 or 40 staff members in a building. They're getting a lot of the same freshman development that school counselors get, but you're really able to reduce the ratio from 250 to 350 a student to almost 20 to 1. Obviously, everyone who becomes a school teacher in our building is a college graduate, and so they know sort of the process of FAFSA and applying and SATs and PSATs and a lot of the training you would get through professional development. But this school, again, was able to, again, build up this cohort where you have freshmen, sophomore, juniors, and seniors all have the same counselor. The seniors are able to sort of mentor up the freshmen and sophomores and the like, to the process of how they gone about applying for college, getting ready for graduation, applying for scholarships, and you have this sort of cohort model. And again, you're also really building up the teachers' sort of sense of not just being a classroom teacher, but being part of the administration and being part of the school. The morale in this school was very high, again, because teachers are not just teaching in the classroom, but they're being part of the administration. Clearly, we would need to increase the number of teachers in the building if you're going to reduce the course load, but I believe it's a way to address the ratio without a lot of the other things that would go into that. So I think, again, if you could look at, the Edmonton city and Alberta province in Canada as a model for how to reduce this, but it would require some innovation and maybe some piloting in some schools where you are empowering certain teachers with certain skills around school counseling and really reduce that ratio. I just wanted to, again, move this conversation to solutions. I mean, again, I'm a parent first and foremost, and conversations around what's happening. It's good to understand what's happening. But tomorrow, I want to know what's next. What are we doing about this? And I think this is one solution. I think our emphasis on school counseling and reducing that ratio will invariably improve our performance with regard to this issue. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Boston.
There's one follow-up question first that I wanted to ask on Ms. Grady's, and I believe it was, I think Ms. Eubanks, I believe, on the PPWs. You did state that we do have one in each high school. I do know that years ago.
I said assigned.
Assigned, that's what I was going to ask, because years ago, we increased the load of our PPWs by assigning them to multiple schools. So I wanted to know, is a PPW only assigned to, when they have a high school, only to that high school?
No.
Or do they have others?
No, they have other schools.
Yeah, so that may be something else that we probably need to look at, with us decreasing, the role and the function of the PPW. Is that something that we can maybe increase to help offset some of the work of the counselors? Because I know they work pretty much hand in hand to get some of this work done. So it's something I want to look at. But in closing, I just want to say that, there's a lot of blame to go around. As a member of this board, I think that it's important that we take this report, we look at it, we dissect it, we make whatever changes, we come up with any recommendations that we need to do. We're right in the middle or the beginning of our budget process. We need to look at it quickly. So if it's a budgetary item that we need to do, we need to be able to address that at this budget at the beginning moving forward. I think if we waste a lot of time blaming this person, that person who did that, who didn't do whatever, we'll waste a lot of valuable time. This is real work. This is where the real work, I believe, as a board and administration begin. It's time for us to roll up our sleeves. If you're not about getting into these committees, sitting back there and working hours and hours like the majority of this board do to do this work and correct these issues will still stay on out there and we will never get anywhere. Our kids will suffer in the process. So it's time for us to put whatever difference that we have, whatever reasons is why we feel that it's easier to play this out in the press. I think it's going to take the administration, this board, and the community, parents, and our students to roll up our sleeves and get down and do the real work. I just think that, it's time to stop the blame game or to get back or whatever we're doing and saying it's political, it's not political. Whatever the reasons are that we're at this point now, we need to address it and move forward. Thank you.
Ms. Page.
So I have one last comment. So instead of focusing on graduating our students, I believe we should be focusing on educating our students, because graduating will come if our students are educated. I believe that the curriculum that is taught in Prince George's County needs to be suited for our students' needs. Granted, we need to give extra educational support to some of our students, just as any other county would. speaking of other counties, we have to recognize that our students are not of the same dynamics of our other neighboring counties. I believe it is time for us to evaluate our current curriculum and how it suits our students. What are our textbooks looking like? Are they made to educate students of our dynamics, students of color and of minority? There is a reason why African Americans, along with other minorities, score higher on the ACT rather than on the SAT. It is because the ACT accompanies material that engage students of color. My question becomes, does our curriculum engage students of color? And are we measuring the effectiveness of the curriculum through students that are currently in the school system?
Yes, actually, we do. We do it through multiple informal assessments. It's called MAP-R. And then also through required assessments, as we discussed earlier, HSA and PARC. And then we also have had an external evaluator come in and do a curriculum audit, just to make sure that our curriculum documents were aligned and met the state requirement in terms of content that was required to be delivered.
So to reiterate my question or rephrase it, the question is whether our curriculum targets students of colors to make sure that they are engaged in the curriculum.
So we make sure that not only in our curriculum, but even in our textbook adoptions, that our resources address the multiple backgrounds of our students and the cultures they come from. Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Wallace.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I forgot I signed up. Let's see, my first question. It's actually a request for a follow-up item from Ms. Parker for the next board meeting. I don't know, it's going to be another one in December, but I know my colleague, Ms. Boston, talked about the committees, and we do have an academic achievement committee, and in this issue, while it was unbeknownst to me, it's been festering for the past 2.5 school years, and I got a text message from one of my constituents who was watching online. It's just requesting, and I guess it speaks to the larger point of accountability, because, you know, despite some of the rhetoric, the end-all be-all is not with the administration and accountability. The board, appointed or elected, must hold the administration accountable. But then the community must hold this board accountable. It stops with the community, not with the board. And so if we have members of this board who have concerns about academic achievement programs but do not attend academic achievement committee meetings, then they need to be held accountable by the community. So I'm requesting the attendance records of all board members, committee members assigned or not, for the past 2.5 years for the Academic Achievement Committee. Because if folks had the concerns about this academic achievement program, they should have been in attendance. And if they weren't, the community will know. Thank you. That's my first question, my first request. The second one speaks to, 90 seconds left, community schools. Speaking on behalf of my colleague, Ms. Roach, this is a major initiative of hers, and we talked about the qualitative stories of our students, whether they're sick or anything like that. I know that the story about the sick student, student A, it is, in some cases, that is an excused absence. But my question is to the administration, and this is just out of pure ignorance of mine, if a student, say, has to skip the last period of high school because they have to go to work to provide for their child or their household, is that considered an excused absence if they purposefully are truant in order to provide for their family?
So I hope they stop your time, because this should
Thank
be
you.
mine now. I think there's a couple pieces to that question. I mean, we have the ability, I think, to do some modified schedules if they have met. And in that case, if they need to leave early and they don't need the credit, you can release a child to go do what they need to do. However, if they just miss the class, like if they just, I gotta go, right, and they're in the class, that's a different thing.
That's considered an unexcused absence.
Is that something that MSD has requirement over, or can this board write a policy that says if you can prove that you are a parent of a child, you need to provide for that family, you have socioeconomic constraints that you need to work?
What would be better is that we modify the schedule and remove that last period, so that they don't get a grade on their transcript that's not reflective of the content that they received or did not receive.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much. And then my last one, there was talk about external auditors. Are there any budgetary implications hiring or contracting with a third-party external auditor for this school year?
So there are always financial, but I think it depends on how we go about it. I mean, we already have external auditors that we contract with to do our annual external audits. Whether you go with internal audit and hire additional staff, because I don't believe that the kind of work we're talking about, they're currently staffed for an internal audit. However it is you go to do it, there's going to be some sort of cost. The question is, what is the most efficient? And when you put out the scope of work and you say, what is it exactly? So I'll just give you an example. You know, if you said, you know, for high schools, if you wanted them to do every high school every year, that's a higher cost than if you wanted to do a third of the high schools each year. Just again, as an example. And so I think, but then you got to say, is it cheaper to do that? And when I say cheaper, you got to consider all the costs. Because if you hire personnel, you have retirement costs, FICA costs, all those other things. If you hire an outside or extend or expand the contract with current outside, you pay the fixed consultant fee or the fixed, you know, contract fee, and you don't have ongoing fees, if that makes sense.
It does.
So you got to look at the total cost, not the short piece of the cost.
Thank you, administration, and thank you, board colleagues, and thank you, community.
Thank you, Mr. Wallace. Per your request, we do keep records. I don't know how far back they go, but we will post those attendance records that we have on follow-up for the next meeting. I don't see any more buzzing in for round two, so that concludes our discussion item on the graduation rate audits, and we will move on to the next item on our business agenda. And I will yield the floor to Dr. Maxwell for an introduction of item 5.1 and 5.2 under the consent agenda.
Thank you, Dr. Eubanks. Items 5.1 and 5.2 require board approval of the Tall Oaks Academy Road dedication and contract approval of a lead agency for the infants and toddlers program.
Thank you. I will entertain a motion to approve items 5.1 and 5.2 under the consent agenda. It's been moved and seconded. Mr. Burrows, you have a question?
Actually, I buzzed in earlier when Mr. Wallace was making his follow-up request. I wanted to add something to that. That's when I buzzed in. Okay.
We'll get you, let's take it as, and whatever you want, follow-up request, just let me know, and I'll put it in the record.
Right, I just want to make sure that we include the level of productivity of those committees and the implementation of those committees as well.
Okay, thank you. So, I'll put before you as a vote for items 5.1 and 5.2 under the consent agenda. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, say no. Thank you, that motion carries. I will now yield the floor to Dr. Maxwell for an introduction of items 6.1 through 6.15 under the budget consent agenda.
Thank you, Dr. Eubanks. Members of the board, items 6.1 to 6.15 require board approval of a Pathways Early Elementary Autism Intervention Program, the Foundation School Partnership, expenditure requirements for December 2017 and January 2018, award of construction contracts for work at the William S. Schmidt Center, the new International High School at Langley Park, and William Wirt Middle School, approval of replacement buses, textbook and instructional computers, suit on high school feasibility study, final acceptance and payment for projects at John Hanson and District Heights, ratification of the fiscal year 2018 and 19 two-year compensation improvements for PGCEA, and ratification of the fiscal year 18 compensation improvements for ASASME Local 2250.
Thank you, colleagues. Now, a number of folks have buzzed in, so let me just ask, are any of these buzzes relating to wanting to pull any of these items, or are they just for questions? questions. Okay, so given that, though, then I will start with a motion to approve items 6.1 through 6.15 under the budget consent agenda. You do want to pull, okay. Which one do you want to pull? Six point nine? 6.9 is pulled. Anybody else want to pull anything? No? Okay, so I will entertain a motion to approve items 6.1 through 6.8 and 6.10 through 6.15 under the budget consent agenda. It has been moved. Do I have a second? It's been moved and seconded. Questions? Is yours back to 6.9? Yeah, okay. Ms. Boston?
I want to know, on some of these contracts that we have here, for like Suitland, and I thank my colleague here for pulling that one. It says it was a feasibility study was done, and then it is awarded a contract. The contractor was awarded. Do we have a listing of those bids? I'm just, I've questioned it because some things have came to my attention about some of these contracts and the cost is separate costs for feasibility, those costs, is separate costs for the design, then it's a separate cost. Is there any way that, maybe if you can't present them now, that you can bring us the list of the bids on some of these projects? A cost comparison, I mean.
Can you hear me? Oh, there you go, sorry. This procurement, or this set of procurements for A&E services was done as a large package procurement, and as a result, we had 8 different school facilities that were being procured. The way in which we're trying to do this is under a negotiated contract. So these are the maximum price contracts on the technical submissions. So we first ranked them by technical feasibility, basically the technical rank of the architectural firms that were being requested to put forward, and they were ranked by that number. It wasn't, the submission is not actually being given out on a price or on a bid price basis. So we're negotiating the price. That's why there's a maximum price listed as opposed to an actual price.
So I can be clear about this process because I really don't know that much other than what information I received from some people that try to bid on some of our projects, and they having issues with the bidding process.
Well, it's not.
So I need to be clear on what you're saying.
Let me explain it a little better. Originally, this is for the A&E services, which is the architectural and engineering services. Specifically, it's for the feasibility study. So the actual contracting work itself is not being started. This is the feasibility study to determine where, all the details about the projects themselves. So it's preliminary to design and construction. So these are just the feasibility studies. The A&E groups that we selected for these projects would be selected to do both the feasibility study and then the subsequent design of the building. So, and we based them on their technical proposals. So each unit, there were about 32 architectural firms that came in to bid on 8 projects. Some of them didn't bid on all of them, some bid on some of them. And we had a large panel. There were multiple interviews given to each architectural firm, and then they were ranked by the projects that they bid on by the technical proposals. Per
I'm not going to ask you to go through a
Yes.
long explanation, but what I'm asking for
Yes, ma'am.
is a list of those proposed, or those 8 companies that you said that bidded on those projects?
There were 8 projects, 32 companies, yes.
Yeah, so can we get a listing of how those bids
Yes, we have the technical proposals, I have the technical proposals and the pricing.
Yeah, so I think part of the report, I think it would be helpful for us to see that,
Certainly.
moving forward. Thank you.
And Ms. Boston, I'd also just offer that you said, some folks were having trouble with the bids. If they need feedback on their bid and how it came through and those kind of things, I think we could also provide that kind of support for individual firms.
Yeah, and to be fair, I know there is almost a complete turnover in that process with new director and Mr. Matlock. I know you're new to that department, and I appreciate you taking on that role and responsibilities. And I know there's a new turnover, but moving forward, we just want to make sure that our process is as visible and that when people do bring concerns to us, that we're able to address those concerns to show that we're doing all this in good faith. Also, before I do, I think Mr. Valentine, I think you're the liaison to the MEE. We put that together about a year or so, I think, and I have yet to see a report, or this board has seen a report on the MBE's that task force recommendation on that policy. I know years ago we wanted to look at our that MBE and how we're actually allowing our minority businesses to be able to bid on those different type of projects or awarded those projects. So I want to know if you'll be able to get that to us soon.
I'll just say one thing, it's not a task force, it's an advisory council, so they
Okay.
meet regularly, and so there's not going to be like a culminating report. We did have administration, purchasing Duke did come to the meeting, I want to say met in April or May, and there were members of the council who did give input. We've elected a chair and a vice chair of that committee who are responsible for the work and those things, and I'm the liaison to it. But we'll continue to work with them and get updates on the work, but there's some things that we need to get to them for the review. But again, I'll let you know, there's not going to be a culminating report. There will be just levels of input that they will give to us on policies coming out and recommendations for future policy.
Yeah, I'm just asking Mr. Valentine that it's been over a year, can we get a report on that?
Well, the body, it might have been passed over a year ago, but they've only met twice. And so by the time that they've come together, but when we meet again, I will definitely bring that up to them about wanting to get an update on the work of the advisory council.
Thank you. Oh, Ms. Williams?
Oh, we'll skip her.
So,
Okay, Miss Ahmed. I have Ahmed and Burrows
So,
and Grady.
just for clarification, I believe Chief Brown, is this your last full board meeting?
Yes, it is.
Chief Brown! No, I just want to thank you for your service to this board, to this system. And I think all of my colleagues share in that thanks. You've done a lot for us. Your team has done a lot for us, and we're thankful for that. So can we give Chief Brown a round of applause?
Thank you.
Thank you for remembering that. Oh, yeah, come on, stand
Oh,
up. Stand up.
especially with all the patience you've enacted on me, I appreciate that too. I had some questions for Ms. Battle, or I guess more clarification points. Could you speak about the specific, specific things that our employees at PGCEA and ACE asked me would receive in the contracts that are before us today? I thought Mr. Robinson, I didn't see Mr. Robinson here. Thank you, Mr. Robinson.
Actually, didn't have my notes. Future presentation. How can I help you? What specific things would you like to know?
What are the bullet points of?
The compensation piece?
Yes,
For
for both.
For Ace Ask Me Local 2250, we had a contract reopener for wages only, and the agreement calls for a step effective January 1, 2018 for those employees, and for anyone in the bargaining unit that is not eligible for a step, they would receive a $1,100 bonus that would also be effective after January 1. We're targeting a date of January the 5th to try to make that happen on. But those are the two compensation items for that particular bargaining unit, because that's all that was open. They were not open for any language changes. For the teacher unit, PGCEA, we're looking at for this fiscal year, 17-18, with a contract that would actually start effective July 1, 2017. There would be a step effective January 1, 2018 for eligible employees. There would also be a 2% one-time lump sum payment for those employees that are not eligible for a step. So that means they're at the top of the wage scale. In this particular case, it's a 2% one-time, it's not a base building proposal. Then in the second year of the agreement for those employees, they would receive a step effective November 1, 2018 into year 2, and also a 2% one-time lump sum payment again in the second year of the agreement. One additional item included in their proposal is that there's the possibility of a 3% retirement notification incentive. So that's for those employees who are fully eligible to retire, who provide notice by a certain date and time. They have the opportunity to have their wage increased by 3% for providing us notice by a certain date.
Can you provide or explain the intent behind that 3% retirement notification initiative?
Sure. The intent behind that is, and I think we heard loud and clear from our labor partners about the loss that they felt that some employees suffered over the past years by not being able to receive a step or in low wage increase years. And so we wanted to look at a way that we could make sure that we could provide something to those employees who elect to retire and go out, and by building in this 3% wage increase for those who would be eligible, they would increase their final compensation. And so it's when you retire, they calculate your last 3 years of your salary, and so you get if you have a higher year increase in there, it would count towards your lifetime earnings in terms of retirement. So it's a benefit and a plus to those individuals who elect that option. And I think it's our way as an employer of recognizing that we understand that there have been some difficult years and some struggling years, and this is the way to give back and to try to help.
Okay. I like the lump sum, I like the step, I like the incentive. I will just say that I think in moving forward, there has to be some type of way to recuperate the steps lost in previous years. And I know the incentive is one way to mitigate that, or, kind of provide some of that funding. But I think that overall, in the long term, we do need to recuperate those steps. So I just hope in future years that we're able to address that and move forward to ensure that our employees receive the type of compensation that we know that they deserve, and to reflect the hard work that they do for our students in our system. That's it.
I think there is agreement all the way around on that concept.
All set? Mr. Barrows.
Well, Mr. Chair, when you were in the back, Ms. Boston mentioned that the board had not received the MBE advisory report. I just messaged one of the committee members who had no clue of what the status is of the committee. That was something that I was very interested in and supporting, and to hear that they've only met once since their first meeting is very disheartening. And so I would ask that the board leadership provide greater oversight on that matter.
Sure. Aren't you on that committee?
No, you did not appoint me to that committee.
Did you ask me to be appointed?
I authored the policy and resolution, worked on it for months.
Ms. Grady?
My question is around William Wirt Middle School. William Wirt.
Yeah. Yes.
Yes, okay. So I see that we have the contract in place for awarded for the construction of the contract.
It's not construction, it's still A&E services, architectural and engineering services.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
It's architectural and engineering services, not construction services.
So can you explain to me what's this phase, like what is it going to do?
What this would do is go into design. They would start designing the new school.
But what's the timeline?
I don't have a timeline that I could articulate at this moment. We still have to sit with the A&E firm and negotiate the final contract, so we don't have it at this time.
So Elizabeth Chason for the record. It usually takes about 9 months to design, another 9 months for permitting. But again, we haven't negotiated with that, with the architect yet.
Permit. And I'm sorry, I know that you have the William Wirt meetings going on. I was able to attend one, and then they all conflict with board meetings.
Right.
So that's why I wanted, but so with the 9-month projection, were we going to be possibly making the cutoff? I know there was a discussion around the timeline of that. Where do you think we're at with the?
Right, and that's what we'll negotiate with the architect. We're hoping we can still meet the timeline, and that's why we rushed it today, and it's here before you now.
Thank you.
So,
Okay, thank you.
okay.
Mr. Wallace?
Thank you very much. Couple questions on everything but 6.9 and a statement. Just quick on 6.1 around the autism program. It may not have to be directly related, but the program that was at Skyline Elementary School that is now regionally located, but particularly one at Suitland Elementary, is that still, give me an update on that program, please.
The programs at the school
The autism program at Suitland Elementary.
Yes, actually, the students have transitioned and are acclimating well.
Perfect, thank you very much. Item 6, skip 609, 611, is this in regards to the work that was done at District Heights Elementary School due to the air quality, Dr. Watts?
Yes, sir.
And everything, the systems are running well over there, I'm hoping?
Yes, sir, and we do monitor that, and we work with the school to check in on them frequently.
And I want to again thank you and your team and Mr. Fawcett for the tireless work that you all did, basically over a weekend, a holiday week. Absolutely, thank you. And then just statements on 614 and 615. I want to thank the administration, Ms. Battle, where's Lou, Ms. Robinson over there in the corner, and of course our labor partners for their collaboration, and hopefully we can pass and ratify these agreements. I want to thank our staff for their tireless work from 4 a.m. to 4 a.m. the next day for their hard work for this school system. I yield back.
Thank you. Seeing no other comments, I will put the vote before you for the budget consent agenda adoption of items 6.1 through 6.8 and 610 through 615 with a special notification of 614 and 15. I will ask Ms. Parker to call the roll and mention quietly that our student board member.
Ms. Ahmed,
Aye.
Ms. Boston,
Aye.
Mr. Burrows, Ms. Eubanks, Ms. Grady,
Aye.
Mr. Valentine, Mr. Wallace,
Aye.
Ms. Williams, Dr. Wiseman, Dr. Eubanks.
Aye.
8 ayes.
Thank you. That motion carries. I will, now let's start by putting a motion on the floor to approve item 6.9 under the budget consent agenda.
So moved.
It's been moved and seconded. Mr. Wallace.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a comment of appreciation for the team that has worked diligently with the Suitland High School community, both the Comprehensive High School and the Center for Visual and Performing Arts. A lot of back and forth, sometimes some friction, sometimes some confusion, but I want to publicly thank all the administrators that were instrumental in us getting to this point. I met earlier this week with the Civic Association president and the PTSA president for the Suitland area and Suitland High School, respectively. And I tried to clear up some concerns and some questions, and I thank Dr. Goldson and the administration for answering those questions for me. But I also, at the very first meeting, the initial one, I made a promise to a 10th grade student. Her name slips my memory. I'm getting older. But I promised her that when we got to this point and we found someone who can begin the work, that we would be sure that in the resolution that there is language that dictates and mandates that a community, student, and alumni-focused town hall to receive their feedback. Members who could not have been on these two project planning committees could have their voices heard. And so, colleagues, with your help, I would hope that we can adopt an amendment to this resolution, and it would state as follows. It would remove the "and" in the third whereas on page 2, and it would replace it after the fourth whereas, and then there would be an additional fifth whereas, and it would state as follows. Whereas the recipient of this award shall partner with the Prince George's County Public Schools to host a student, community, and alumni-focused town hall for the Suitland High School community to obtain feedback on the respective projects, semicolon.
Can I second that?
I welcome the second.
It has been moved and seconded. Any questions? Let me just ask from our contractor folks. Are there any contractual / legal / policy conflicts with a resolution like this?
No.
Okay, good. Any further discussion?
We're fine with partnering with the
Okay.
firm that wins the
All right.
award. I mean, that's what the resolution asks for, is to partner with us to make sure that the
Perfect.
community has an opportunity to be heard. And we're okay with
Perfect.
giving
Any
them an
further questions?
opportunity to be
Oh,
heard.
sorry. Didn't mean to rush you. Talking over Loopy and I'm rushing Dr. Maxwell. All right. So all those in favor of the amendment, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no. Thank you. That motion carries. We will now put before you item 6. Which one is this? 6.9, as amended. Would you please go on ahead? This is budget item 2, so please, Ms. Parker, call the roll on item 6.9 as amended.
Ms. Ahmed,
Aye.
Ms. Boston,
Aye.
Mr. Burrows, Ms. Eubanks, Ms. Grady,
Aye.
Mr. Valentine, Mr. Wallace, Ms. Williams, Dr. Wiseman, Dr. Eubanks.
Aye. Do have 8, don't we?
8.
Thank you. That motion carries. Where then am I? We are on governance, second reader, and I will yield the floor to Dr. Maxwell for an introduction of item 8.1 under governance, second reader.
Thank you, Dr. Eubanks. If the board would allow me just one moment of indulgence, as we did those as a big package, and I know there was some testimony, I would just like to thank 2250 and PGCEA for their collaboration and their hard work with our team to get us where we are today, and congratulate them on having a new contract.
I thought we were going to take a picture, but it looks like
We're going to do that.
we'll do that.
Yes,
We'll do a signing ceremony.
so we know that, I'm not sure if it's because we're a little long in the hour, or not, but several, the president of PGCA had to leave. I also know the administrator of 2250 had to leave, along with members of the negotiations team. So the administration is working with our labor partners to schedule a ceremonial contract signing. It'll likely be next week. We'll make sure it's publicized tonight, a media advisory, do a press release, the full shebang. So we'll take care of it, but we probably were a little later long in the tooth. That's
I started to ask to move it up in the agenda, but it is what it is.
No problem. So we'll take care of that formally. I know both organizations asked for their negotiation teams to be a part of the ceremonial. The board, and along with the administration, will make sure that's communicated broadly.
Okay. Thank you.
So item second reader, item 8.1 requires board approval for the renewal of CMIT South and the merger with its elementary school.
Yes, it does. May I please entertain a motion to approve item 8.1 under governance, second reader?
So moved.
It has been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Mr. Wallace?
Thank you. I'm trying to see representatives from CMIT.
Yes.
Oh, perfect. Just one quick question for you folks. And thank you all for indulging in the elongated meeting. I'll wait. I'm sorry. No, don't run. I got 5 minutes, only 30 seconds. I've asked this question of similar public charter schools that have come to us before us for renewal, and just to get a scope of the student demographics of CMIT South and how close they mirror the demographics of the public school system. And if they're not close in mirroring, what is the plan for the public charter school organization to get to that sweet spot of mirroring the demographics for the school system?
I understand the question. I can tell you all of our CMIT schools are minority-majority schools. In terms of the exact percentage, Mrs. White?
Perfect.
So this is Mrs. Safa. My name is Mark Sutherland, by the way, for the record. I work with Chesapeake Lighthouse Foundation. This is Mrs. Safa. She's the principal of CMIT South.
Welcome both.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I believe we mirror Prince George's County demographic with the exception of the female-male ratio. We have a wide gap between the female-male ratio. I believe we're at 56 male, 44% female, and that's what's kind of different from what PG County demographic is. We happen to have more students, male students, going through the lottery to come to the school.
Perfect, thank you very much. Just a quick note or request, the students on free and reduced meals, you have I know it's late in the day, you have a rough guesstimation on what that is.
It's
And
about
special education as well?
23%. It's about 23%.
50? And special
23.
education? And 23?
Special education, we're about 5%,
Okay.
and I think 504 is about 6%.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
All right, seeing no other questions, I will put the vote before you to approve item 8.1 on the governance second reader. All those in favor, please say aye. All those opposed? Thank you, that motion carries. Colleagues, I'll bring before you yield the floor to Dr. Maxwell, I should say, for an introduction of items 9.1 and 9.2 under first reader.
Thank you, Dr. Eubanks. Members of the board, item 9.1 and 9.2 include the legislative agenda for 2018 and the 2018-19 school calendar. Both items as first readers require no discussion this afternoon.
What is that, 2250? Thank you. Colleagues, may I take a motion to, for items 9.1 and 9.2 under new business first reader? Been moved and seconded. Ms. Ahmed?
Just one comment to administration and to board staff that there are two calendars under the 9.02. One request or suggestion that perhaps we can do a voting poll with the community to be able to have them have input on which calendar they would like to see.
We've been doing that and intend to do it again.
Okay.
Yeah,
Can
so we'll place a, after first reader, we'll place a community survey that explains the calendar in detail and provides the two, and we'll bring that back to you before second reader.
Okay, front page of the website, the whole shebang.
Well, we won't even just wait for the website for them to come to us. We'll use our Gov delivery to send out to over 200,000 plus, and we'll have it on the website. We'll also
Awesome.
share with the Board of Education so that you all can use your own list, which might be different, so that we get a pretty broad representation of how people feel.
Okay, thank you.
All right, it's been properly moved and seconded to approve items 9.1 and 9.2 under first reader. All those in favor, please say aye. All those opposed? Thank you. That motion carries.
Dr. Eubanks,
Yes.
would you like another shift of 2250 came in? I thought you might like to do the acknowledgement this time.
Oh, absolutely. We passed and ratified the contract, and a number of us have thanked all of our members of 2250 for your outstanding work and for the tough work that we did on this contract negotiation, and for wanting to continue to work collaboratively with you. Mr. Rhodes talked about the fact that we didn't quite get our picture done. I'm certainly still willing to do it for folks who are here, but that we also are going to reschedule something. So I'm ready to do the picture as well.
Yeah, so right now, the picture would be done with an iPhone. But we can make a more formal,
All right.
again, presentation.
The more
I mean,
pictures, the more pictures, the better, as far as I'm concerned.
Fine with me, yeah.
Mr. Chair, I think there's some confusion. They're not here for a picture or anything that you're talking about right now.
Oh, that's what I was just told, so that's.
These guys are here. I just met them outside because of another issue. I think Sean is getting in contact with Lou to help us work through that issue.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for that clarification, but thank you for being here and for your work anyway.
Yeah, and if any member would like to join us in the back to listen to their issue and figure out how we can help them with that issue.
All right. Thank you for that clarification. All right, then. Item 10.0, follow-up items. There are no follow-up items for tonight's agenda. Colleagues, may I have a motion to approve actions taken in executive session on Thursday, November 9th, 2017? It has been properly moved and seconded that the Board of Education hereby approve actions taken in executive session on November 9, 2017 as follows: labor negotiations, personnel appointments, and administrative matters. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed? Thank you. That motion carries. Colleagues, may I entertain a motion to adjourn? So moved. It has been moved and seconded to adjourn. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of adjourning, please say aye. All those opposed? Thank you very much, colleagues. We are adjourned. Have a great evening.